Chapter 1037. It was a quiet night. In fact, there was nothing much to talk about. After all, they were in the hospital and they had to be quiet. Qili and Du Ning stayed with him for the whole night. Jiang Hai went to the place where the beds were rented and rented 2 more military uniforms. Fortunately, the ward was big enough. Originally, 4 people had to stay in a ward like this. Now that it was changed into an intensive care unit, there were only 2 beds. However, it was not a problem to put up 2 more beds in other places. After letting Azalina and Wallace Shelley stay for the night, Jiang Hai went to the car and spent the night in it. The next morning, Jiang Hai got out of the car with a yawn. He had to admit that it was really tiring to spend the night in the car. Jiang Hai was still tall and the Rolls-Royce had a lot of space. However, Jiang Hai was lying in the front, and his legs were empty. He could not lie in the back and it was very uncomfortable. He either had to curl his neck or empty legs. Fortunately, with his strong physique, he recovered after a few hours of sleep. At dawn he got out of the car. The sun rose very early in Bing City. In summer, the sun rose at around 3 a.m. In winter, it was the shortest day and the sun rose at around 6 a.m. When Jiang Hai went to school in the past, he had to get up early to take the bus. Every day he would wake up at 5:30 a.m., have breakfast, wash up and then leave at 6 a.m. He would take the bus at one stop, and it would take him about an hour to get to his high school. The arrival time of his high school was 7:10 a.m., and he could only leave at this time. Therefore, Jiang Hai was very used to the weather in Bing City. Although it was not winter now and for some other places spring might have ended. But for Bing City winter had just ended. Although the temperature at night would not drop below 0, it would be at least 3 or 4 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was very big. It was quite cold in the morning when the sun rose. But even so, because the sun rose early, the people in Bing City also went to work early. Jiang Hai got out of the car and stretched his stiff neck. Looking at the distance, there were already a lot of people moving around. Some were students going to school, some were employees going to work, and some were sanitation workers. Taking advantage of the fact that there were fewer people in the morning, they quickly cleaned up the debris on the road. Let's get something to eat. After stretching for a while, he looked at the time. It was already 5 a.m. Jiang Hai touched his stomach, which had only eaten 1 meal on the plane yesterday, and whispered. Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone to check. There was a morning market nearby and he did not drive. He used the GPS to drive there. The morning market was one of the more unique places in Wuxia. In addition to selling breakfast, there were also a lot of things that were sold there. Vegetables, seafood, meat, fruits and general merchandise were sold there. Could be said that everything could be found there. There used to be a morning market near Jiang Hai's house. When he was in school, he liked to go there to buy a fire spoon to eat. This fire spoon wasn't made with fire. Although Jiang Hai suspected that the people here learned it after listening to the crosstalk, they didn't really learn it. This was because the fire-steamed ladles in the Central Plains were similar to meat sandwiches. It was completely different from the steamed ladles in Bing City. This steamed ladle was made with bread and meat, and then it was fried in a pan of oil. It could also be said that it was fried and eaten after it was cooked. Although it was not difficult to cook, it tasted good. Jiang Hai liked this steamed ladle since he was young. These few years when he was in the US, he would occasionally fry it and eat it. It was quite good. Other than the steamed ladles, the breakfast in Bing City was quite rich. The big fruits were fried and piping hot. There were also wontons, ramen, tofu pudding, etc. To be honest, if Feng Yu did not eat them for a long time, he would miss them. According to the navigation, Jiang Hai found the morning market here. At a glance, both sides of the street were selling things. Some urban management officers were here to maintain law and order. Perhaps this was one of the few places where they could be so harmonious. The reason why the morning market was called the morning market was because it didn't open during the day. The morning market had to be finished before 7:30 in the morning. Around 8 o'clock in the morning peak, there would be no more. Just like the night market also had to wait until the evening peak to be over before it could open. Jiang Hai was very familiar with the morning market. After he entered, he saw the 200 renminbi he asked from Qili yesterday. It was enough to buy breakfast. After entering the morning market, Jiang Hai went straight to the steamed ladle stall and bought 40 steamed ladles. These ladles were very small. Men could only eat 1 steamed ladle in 1 bite, and women could only eat 1 steamed ladle in 2 bites. After buying 40 steamed ladles, Jiang Hai went to buy big fruits, fried dough sticks and some soy milk and tofu pudding. After spending almost all the 200 renminbi, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. But before he left, he saw a stall in the distance surrounded by a lot of people. Jiang Hai glanced over and was a little surprised. because this stall was selling giant salamanders. But it was not the small ones for children to play with. It was the big ones, about 3 to 4 caddies. Many people surrounded him at this time looking at these things, but no one was buying them. "Brother, you better run away. This is a protected animal. How dare you sell it?" After Jiang Hai came over, some people in the crowd said to the man selling giant salamanders. But looking at the greedy look in his eyes, it seemed that he wanted to buy them. "I have nothing to do with them. They are farmed. They all have a number. They can be sold." However, after listening to his words, the other party shook his head with a smile and said indifferently, Jiang Hai had heard about the farming of giant salamanders a long time ago. Even the Imperial Court TV broadcast the farming situation, but it was the first time he saw the real thing. "Farmed? That's boring. How much is your giant salamander?" Hearing that it was farmed, many people lost interest in looking at it. People in Wuxia were like this. For wild and farmed animals, they were obviously biased towards wild things. In the United States, wild and farmed animals were only biased towards farmed animals because the farmed environment was better. For example, cattle had their own labels. What they ate, whether they were sick or not, could be controlled. But you didn't know if there were any parasites in the wild. This was also why there were often people in the United States who went into the mountains to hunt, but they didn't eat the prey they hunted. Instead, they directly put it there to nourish the earth. Of course, there were some exceptions such as Jiang Hai, who liked to eat the deer or wild boar he hunted. 300 per caddy. Hearing someone asking for the price, this person also raised 3 fingers and said to the crowd. Hearing this person's words, the crowd here suddenly dispersed by 2/3. As they walked away, they were still talking. 300 yuan to eat it? Indeed, 300 yuan per caddy. One fish weighed almost 3 caddies. This was a little less than 1,000 yuan. Although the people who came to the morning market to buy things were not poor, they were definitely people who spent less money. They were a little reluctant to spend 1,000 yuan to buy this thing. However, Jiang Hai's eyes suddenly twitched. This thing seemed to be a way to make money, but this idea was quickly extinguished by him. Indeed, if this thing was raised, it would make a lot of money. But this thing was difficult to raise. Jiang Hai was so lazy. If he directly raised it in the river, what if it ate his Yangtze River knife? Then who could Jiang Hai complain to? So he just looked at it, then turned and left. He carried a lot of things and went to the hospital. When he entered the ward, he just happened to see Jing Xioga, who had just come over. She, who had changed out of her maid costume, looked very youthful and beautiful. Her original dullness seemed to have disappeared a little. In the eyes of others, she might be a cold person. But when she saw Jiang Hai, she was obviously stunned. Then she nodded to Jiang Hai seriously and smiled. After Jiang Hai nodded to her, he saw at a glance that she was still holding an insulated lunchbox in her hand. "This is..." Pointing to the insulated lunchbox, Jiang Hai asked her with some doubts. "This is the breakfast I prepared for Madam. Madam really scared me yesterday. Fortunately, God bless her." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jing Xioga also nodded and said to him. As she spoke, there was a look of horror on her face. "Breakfast? What is this? Did the old lady eat this yesterday morning?" Jiang Hai, who had some doubts about Jing Xioga, couldn't help but be stunned after hearing her words. Then he asked her, but he was already on guard in his heart. "And Madam eats porridge every morning?" Yesterday morning was the same, but when she was eating porridge, she received a call from Master San. It seemed that Master Tao was detained somewhere, and the old lady suddenly fell down. Hearing Jiang Hai's question, Jing Xioga didn't feel anything wrong and said in detail. Hearing her words, there was a voice in Jiang Hai's heart telling him that this matter must be related to Jing Xioga, but he didn't know whether she knew it or not. "Jiang Hai, you are back. Xioga is back too." Soon the elevator arrived at the floor where the ward was located. Walking out of the elevator, Qi Li and the others had just come out of the ward. Seeing Jiang Hai and Jing Xioga coming together, her expression couldn't help but be a little strange. "Can you show me the porridge in your hand?" Seeing Qi Li and the others coming over, Jiang Hai handed the food in his hand to Qi Li and the others, then he looked at Jing Xioga and said with a serious face. Jing Xioga was a little confused at this time. She looked at Qi Li and saw that Qi Li also nodded, so she handed over the insulated lunchbox without hesitation. Chapter 1038. After receiving the insulated lunchbox, Jiang Hai immediately opened it. There was indeed porridge inside. Jiang Hai smelled it and there was no strange smell. It was just a very ordinary red date and barley porridge. It was good for ordinary women to eat it, and Jiang Hai's extraordinary sense of smell did not smell anything different. This made Jiang Hai frown. Could it be that he guessed wrong? It was not because of the food she ate but simply because she did not eat his meat? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai was even more puzzled. But at this time, footsteps sounded, and then Qi Jie and Qi Ya quickly ran in from outside the hospital. They took off from New York at 5 o'clock in the morning. After flying to the capital, they waited for a few hours before taking the plane back to Bing City, so they had just landed. When Jiang Hai went to buy breakfast, Qi Li had already asked Du Ning to pick them up. Now the three of them were walking quickly. Seeing Qi Jie, a professional, coming, Jiang Hai immediately handed her the porridge. Qi Jie's cooking skills were quite reliable. When Qi Li sniffed the porridge, her face changed instantly and she spat out a word, "Catch him and kill him." Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some doubts, and she immediately took out her mobile phone and opened the encyclopedia. She found a plant and put it in Jiang Hai's hand, and Jiang Hai was also looking at the introduction of this plant. Catch him and kill him. Wuxia should be called digitalis, and it is native to Central and Southern Europe. This plant is originally a medicine for heart disease, but if a healthy person takes it or overdoses, it will cause atrial fibrillation, and with some stimulation, it is easy to induce heart disease. After letting Jiang Hai read the encyclopedia, Qi Jie began to explain. As she spoke, she looked at Jing Xiua. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jing Xiua was shocked and took a few steps back. She leaned against the wall. No, I didn't want to harm madam. Eldest miss, you have to believe me. I didn't want to harm madam. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jing Xiui was completely panicked. Her legs were weak and her vision was blacked out, but she kept shouting loudly. All right, we know. You've been like our fourth sister all these years. If you wanted to harm someone, you would have done it long ago. You wouldn't have chosen to do it now. Tell us what's going on. Or who made you do it? Hearing Jing Xiua's words, Qi Li's eyes turned cold. Whether it was from a humanitarian point of view or from a sisterly point of view, she trusted Jing Xiua very much. Moreover, it was impossible for Jing Xiua to know about things like digitalis. So, although she did it, the person behind it was definitely not her. Yes, it was third madam. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jing Xiua barely took a breath and then whispered. The third madam in her mouth was actually Qi Yuanlong's wife, Zhang Yu. Jiang Hai also knew a little about this person. In the past, she was a third-tier celebrity. She thought that she had climbed up the social ladder after climbing up to Qi Yuanlong. She probably didn't have a good time recently. Explain it in detail. Hearing her words, Qi Li's eyes turned cold. She hated family thieves the most. This time these people dared to harm her mother. These guys were really looking for death. During the new year. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jing Xiua slowly said. She was shocked just now and hadn't completely recovered yet. Now she was still timid when talking about it. Fortunately, Jiang Hai and the others still understood. During the new year, Qi Yuanlong's family and Qi Song's family came over. After being slapped in the face by Jiang Hai, Qi Song's family went back. In the future they would treat it as if they didn't have relatives. They really didn't have any tricks. They couldn't bear to put down their pride. But Qi Yuanlong was different. This guy had been a troublemaker since he was a child. Not long after Jiang Hai and Qi Li left, they went to ask for help again. But this time only Qi Yuanlong and Zhang Yu went. Originally, after they went there, they only talked about some trivial matters. Jiang Hai's mother-in-law didn't care about it. After all, he was her late husband's younger brother. She was really afraid that one day she would die and go to hell. When she met her old man would ask her how she would answer. So, she also intended to repair their relationship. Because Zhang Yu was still young, she also went to help when Jing Xiua ordered the others to prepare the food at home. The first thing she did was to slander Jiang Hai and say bad things about him directly. It probably wouldn't work. After all, Jiang Hai was now the pillar of the Qi family. So, she deliberately changed the bone in the egg and said that the food sent by Jiang Hai was not good. The heavy metal in the sea fish exceeded the limit. Beef was now popular in the Western world. If it were a person with the same IQ as a normal person, they would laugh. Even if they believed it, they would go to some institutions to check it. However, Jing Xiua didn't know much about these things. She wanted to report it to the old lady, but Zhang Yu said that she shouldn't tell the old lady about it. It wouldn't look good. Their family was now rich, so they could just buy a new one. So, the beef and fish sent by Jiang Hai in the past 6 months were all thrown away or frozen in the refrigerator by Jing Xiua. Hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. He finally understood what it meant to treat kindness as malice. How much did those things cost? Qi Li was also angry, but there was no other way. Jing Xiua was like this, so she really couldn't say anything. After Zhang Yu and her husband came a few times, Zhang Yu and Jing Xiua gradually became familiar with each other. Once, the two talked about heart disease. Zhang Yu said that heart disease was basically hereditary. Since Qi Li's father died of heart disease, maybe her mother had it too. If Jiang Hai was here, he would give her a big slap. How could a husband and wife pass on heart disease to each other? But Jing Xiuwa believed it. She told Jing Xiuwa that Digitalis could treat heart disease and asked her to give some to the old lady every day. If she didn't have any disease, she could just treat it as a precaution. Besides, it was Chinese medicine, so it was fine to put it in the food. If she was sick, it would be cured. If she wasn't sick, it would strengthen her body. After hearing her words, Jing Xiuwa quietly went out to ask around. After confirming that Digitalis could indeed treat heart disease, she bought some back. While she stopped using the ingredients from Jiang Hai's side, she gave the old lady some Digitalis when cooking. Of course, she also ate those things, but she was young. Qi Li's mother was already in her 50s. How could she compare with a young person? In addition, when she was eating porridge yesterday morning, Qi Yuanlong called her, crying. He told her that his son had been detained by someone when he went out to play with money. He would only let him go if he asked for 10 million. Otherwise he would kill him. This matter, coupled with the fact that she had eaten too much Digitalis, made the old lady very angry. This frightened Jing Xiuwa. She immediately called Qi Li. Then the scene of Jiang Hai rushing back from Paris overnight happened. You really have good intentions but ended up doing bad things. Do you think that Jiang Hai's fishing ground and manor are the rivers in front of our house? Where did the heavy metal come from? If the heavy metal exceeded the limit, how could Jiang Hai sell it at such a high price? Foot and mouth disease? I really don't know what you're talking about. How could you believe Zhang Yu's words? Hearing Jing Xiuwa's words, Qi Li was really angry. But looking at the pitiful Jing Xiuwa, she didn't know what to say. She knew that this silly girl was being used by others. What could she say? Hearing Jing Xiuwa's words, Jiang Hai and the others remained silent. What Jing Xiuwa said was 99.9% likely to be true, but Zhang Yu was the one who instigated her. Jiang Hai and the others obviously couldn't do anything about it. First, this matter seemed to have nothing to do with her. She just moved her mouth. Second, the Digitalis was not bought by her. She just said it casually. If this matter was reported to the heavens, Jiang Hai and the others could not do anything. But this guy almost killed Qi Li, Qi Jie and Qi Ye's mother. This matter definitely couldn't be forgotten. I really can't take this lying down. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but punch the wall in front of him. Why don't we go? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina hesitated for a moment and said, since the law couldn't do anything, it was time for them to take action. But hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. No, there are many people watching me and Qi Group in China now. The coverage of Sky Eyes in China is much higher than in the United States. If anything goes wrong, our team in China will be finished. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said helplessly. He didn't care about the money he invested in Qi Group, but he knew how Qi Li's family felt about Qi Group. It was impossible for them to take Madame Qi and perish together with Zhang Yu. So for a while the people in the corridor quieted down. Looking at everyone's expression, Jiang Hai was the first to shake his head and stand up. Forget it, let's not think about it first. This matter can't end like this. Leave it to me. Let's go eat first. After eating, you guys figure out how to arrange the shifts here. If there's anything you need, tell me and I'll buy it. Staying here in silence was not a solution. Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family would definitely not let them go, but the problem was how to do it. This was still worth discussing. Looking at the haggard faces of Qi Li and her sisters, Jiang Hai clapped his hands. This was the time for men to stand up. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone nodded. They were relieved to leave this matter to Jiang Hai. Thinking of this, Wallace Shelley, who was carrying the breakfast that Jiang Hai bought, also walked into the room with breakfast. Everyone also ate there. Halfway through, Qi Li's mother woke up. It seemed that today should be a good day. Chapter 1039. Hurry up, what are you two dawdling over there for? Standing in front of the wardrobe, Lu Yuanlong was fiddling with the tie of his suit with a smile on his face. His son and his wife were still sitting in the distance, not moving at all. Qi Yuanlong could understand that his son was not moving, but Zhang Yu, who used to be very active, was also silent at this time. What's going on? Why aren't you moving? Looking at the two, Qi Yuanlong frowned and said loudly, Tisk, why should I go see that old woman? Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Jingtao said unhappily, don't mess around with me. Haven't you been miserable enough outside? How did you come back this time? Don't you know it in your heart? If you weren't the young master of the Qi family, would you be able to come back? When those people find out that you're not the young master of the Qi family, Who do you expect to pay your 10 million gambling debt? Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, Qi Yuanlong couldn't help but curse. Since being driven out of the Qi family, Qi Yuanlong's family really didn't have a good life. Although it was said that a starving camel was bigger than a horse, the problem was that the camel was already dead. The meat on its body would slowly rot, but the meat on a horse's body would slowly grow as it ate. Ever since they left the Qi family, they had nothing but some money in their hands. During the new year, they went to the Qi family to make a scene, but it was useless. Instead, they completely offended Jiang Hai. After coming back, Qi Yuanlong felt that they couldn't just sit around and eat. In fact, their family was still rich, but they could spend 1 million a day in the past. Now they could only spend 10,000 a day. Naturally, he felt that the gap in his heart was too big. So he thought about it and prepared to save the country in a roundabout way. First, he made a connection with Qi Li's mother, and then through Qi Li's mother he could find Qi Li and Jiang Hai. With her mother's relationship, even if he couldn't let them go back to their previous life, he could still give them some money to drink soup. After all, he was her biological uncle. That was why he always brought Zhang Yu to Qi Li's house. Zhang Yu also behaved very well. Gradually, the relationship between the two families became closer. He didn't know what had happened yesterday. After making a phone call, he was suddenly hung up. At night, he found out from his friend in the hospital that his sister-in-law was hospitalized and Jiang Hai and Qi Li were back. He rolled his eyes. To him, this was a good idea to flatter his sister-in-law. Therefore, he asked his whole family to go to the hospital to see his sister-in-law. However, his son and daughter-in-law obviously didn't think so. I was originally the young master of the Qi family. Those assets were originally mine. Jiang Hai and Qi Li that be *TCH only stole my things. Now you want me to beg them to give me food to eat? Dad, where's your backbone? Looking at Qi Yuanlong, Qi Zhengtao straightened his neck and roared loudly. Hearing his words, Qi Zhengtao didn't know what to say now. This was because he was really a little speechless. This was what he had taught Qi Zhengtao since he was a child. Qi Zhengtao said that the Qi family was passed down to males and not females. The 3 daughters of his uncle's family would all be married off in the future. This huge Qi family would be his in the future and so on. Qi Zhengtao believed Qi Yuanlong's words. In addition, Qi Li's grandfather and grandmother favored boys over girls. If they were still alive, it might be very troublesome for Qi Li to take over the Qi family. However, the problem now was that Qi Li was the master of the Qi family. Qi Zhengtao couldn't understand the situation, and Qi Yuanlong had nothing to say about it. He really had nothing to say. What about you? What are you doing? Looking at his son who straightened his neck, Qi Yuanlong sighed and looked at Zhang Yu. Well, there might be something that I want to tell you. Seeing Qi Yuanlong looking over, Zhang Yu smiled awkwardly. What's the matter? Looking at her face, Qi Yuanlong frowned. He had a feeling that something might be wrong. It's like this. You know, when we went to the Qi family's mansion, I would help that little girl, Jing Xiua, cook or something. At first, I talked about Jiang Hai and said that his beef and fish were not good, and Jing Xiua believed me. Later, I was also a person who didn't guard the door, so I said that digitalis could cure heart diseases. My elder brother had a heart attack, so maybe my sister-in-law had it too. After I came back, I checked and found out that heart diseases are not contagious between husband and wife, and if you eat too much digitalis, it's easy to have a heart attack. Looking at Qi Yuanlong, Zhang Yu whispered, but her voice became softer and softer as she spoke. Hearing Zhang Yu's words, Qi Yuanlong's head buzzed. He had a friend in the hospital who tipped him off, so he naturally knew what happened to his sister-in-law. She had a heart attack. Originally, he thought it was a natural disaster, but now it seemed that it might be a man-made disaster. How did you? God, what should I do now? His vision turned black and Qi Yuanlong sat on the ground, but he was not in the mood to relax at this time. Because this stinky woman's mouth did not guard the door, this time all his previous efforts were wasted. Thinking of this, Qi Yuanlong's face suddenly turned red. After getting up from the ground, he ran in front of Zhang Yu and gave him a big slap. His plan was ruined because of this guy. His family was finished. It's useless for you to hit me. Even if you kill me, will sister-in-law's illness be cured? Covering her face, Zhang Yu did not dare to fight back. She could only look at Qi Yuanlong pitifully and shout loudly. That's right, Dad, why did you hit Auntie Zhang? I think Auntie, you did a good job. At this time, Qi Jingtao also said with a smile. Hearing his son's words, Qi Yuanlong glared at him. Was this something he should say? Those people who stole my things are all dead. Dad, if Qi Li's family is all dead, who will the Qi group belong to? Looking at his father's glare, Qi Jingtao did not care. He was still sitting on the sofa and said with a smile. How dare you have such an idea? Hearing his words, Qi Yuanlong was also angry and shouted loudly. What's the big deal? Those things were originally mine. They stole my things and now I'm just asking them to return it to me. If they don't return it, I can only use some violent means. What's more, Jiang Hai is now the head of the Qi family. Jiang Hai is a ruthless and black-hearted guy. You don't need me to remind you. Dad, if he knew that this was done by Auntie Yu, would he let it go? Indeed, Auntie Yu just moved her mouth. Even if she goes to court, she won't win. But do you think he won't use some underhanded means? Looking at Qi Yuanlong's expression, Qi Jingtao was not afraid. Instead, he sat there with a smile and said indifferently. Hearing his son's words, Qi Yuanlong's originally angry expression gradually calmed down. Obviously, he was also thinking about it. Indeed, as Qi Jingtao said, if Qi Li's family was all dead, who would the Qi group belong to? Although Qi Song was his elder brother, he was still his cousin. There was no doubt that he was the first heir. Regardless of Jiang Hai's things, thinking about the current market value of the Qi group, it was impossible to say that he was not tempted. At that time he would have money, power, and everything. He might have a chance to succeed. What do you think? Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, Qi Yuanlong looked at him and said with a serious face. If Jiang Hai had stayed in the United States and Qi Li had stayed in the capital, maybe I wouldn't have many ways. But now that they are in Bingqing, I can let them know what it means to be far away from the emperor. Hearing that his father was about to compromise, Qi Jingtao also said with a smile on his face. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know this at this time. But even if he knew, he would probably just laugh. What a joke. Who were the martial artists on Jiang Hai's side now? Not to mention Jiang Hai, who had 8 times the physical fitness of the human limit, Azalina, who was one of the 12 strongest people in a European spy agency, Wallace Shelley, and Du Ning, who were all first-class masters. Not to mention that the people Qi Jingtao found were at most some ruffians. Even if he found special forces and professional killers, it was impossible for them to be opponents of these 4 people. If 1 came, they would kill 1. If 2 came, they would kill a pair. If 10 came, they would alert the central government. Would he dare? Having said that, after learning that the mastermind behind the scenes was Zhang Yu, Jiang Hai and Qi Li also discussed it together. From today onwards, Qi Li's mother's meals would be taken care of by Qi Ya. Qi Jie and Qi Li would take turns to take care of Qi Li's mother. Every day during the day, Jiang Hai would come over to see if there was anything he could help with. At the same time, he would think of ways to deal with Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family. Between Azalina and Du Ning, one was responsible for staying in the ward, and the other was responsible for staying in Qi Li's house. If Qi Ya wanted to come over to deliver food, she would drive. As for Wallace Shelley, she had to collect all the information at home. As for Zheng Xiua, although she was only used by others and did bad things out of kindness, she was not allowed to go out for the next few days. As for other punishment, it was unlikely that they would use other measures. Qi Li's mother sincerely treated her as a daughter, and Qi Li and the others also sincerely treated her as a sister. Naturally, they could not send her to prison. They could not beat her up, so they could only leave her at home. The best result now was that she did not cause trouble. At the same time, Jiang Hai immediately called Ai Xiaoxi and asked her to send a batch of beef and fish back to Bing City. These were their rations. After all the division of labor was completed, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. At least he did not need to worry about safety now. As for how to deal with Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong, to be honest, he was still confused. Chapter 1040. Puff. After wiping the water off his face, Jiang Hai let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the guys who were soaking in the pool in the distance, Jiang Hai walked over and slowly walked into the huge warm pool. After sitting in, Jiang Hai couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he covered his forehead with a towel. When Jiang Hai returned to Bingqing, it was naturally impossible for him not to play with his little friends. When he came out to play, he had to take a bath. Jiang Hai liked to take a bath, especially with some of his friends. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't come here just to take a bath. In his manor, there was a natural hot spring. There were not many bathhouses in China that could be compared to his natural hot spring, especially in Bingqing where there were no hot springs. Jiang Hai came to the bathhouse to take a bath, but more importantly, there was someone to give him a bath. However, that had to wait for a while. After sitting down, Jiang Hai watched the TV in front of him while feeling that the hot water was dispelling his fatigue. When are you going to leave this time? Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan turned around and asked him. I don't know. I guess it will take at least a month. After all, my mother-in-law's condition is not very good. If she wants to have surgery, a month is the minimum. With his eyes half closed, Jiang Hai estimated. In fact, with the nourishment of his spiritual energy, it didn't matter whether the heart bypass surgery was done or not. However, this was Wuxia, and Jiang Hai didn't want to expose too many things. The heart bypass surgery could be done without, but it had to be done slowly. Moreover, Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family were waiting for him to deal with. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei, who was next to him, sighed and said, "When people get older, they will have more diseases. In addition, the temperature difference here is big. When winter and spring come, it is indeed easy to cause cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases." Not long ago, his grandmother had just passed away. It was also around this time, but she had passed away peacefully. She had passed away when she was sleeping at home. Hung was over 80 years old. This could be considered a good death. After all, in ancient times there was a saying, people should die at home and not in the hospital or other places. Otherwise, it would be considered a violent death. But now no one cared about this. After all, when people passed away they would be cremated. Even their bodies could not be preserved. But in Bing City, it was winter and spring and most of the old people passed away. Have you ever thought of moving your mother-in-law to another place to live? Hearing Su Wei's words, Fu Yuan nodded and asked Jiang Hai. But after hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. There were only two places to take his mother-in-law away. One was Qi Li's place. There was no need to consider this. Everyone knew the quality of the air in the capital. If his mother-in-law went there, she might die even faster. Some people said that things like smog were a product of industrial progress. It was unavoidable, and those developed countries would only have heavier smog. Indeed, this was true. If you look at the newspaper 40 years ago, you will find that the newspaper in the 70s did indeed report the extremely serious problem of smog in the United States. Yes, smog also appeared during the development of the United States. But the United States was different from Wuxia. In Wuxia, the rich had the final say. When the rich felt that it was going to be over, they forced the government to improve the environment. After 40 years, everyone knew that smog was no longer in the United States. Of course, the air in some large industrial cities may not be good, such as New York and Detroit, but at least after leaving the city, the air was quite good, such as Winthrop. But Wuxia was different. As for how different it was, in order to prevent Jiang Hai from disappearing, there was no need to explain. Of course, different countries had different advantages. For example, China was much better than the United States in some aspects. During last year's presidential election in the United States, the current candidate said that the infrastructure of the United States was like that of a third world country. This was not a joke. The public transportation in the United States was almost only by car and plane. First, it was because gasoline was cheap. Second, it was because there were no tolls. But to be honest, driving was very tiring, so most people chose to take a plane. However, taking a plane required checking in, going to the airport, and waiting. Compared to a plane, trains were much more convenient. But the trains in the United States, Huaxia's high-speed rail might not be the best in the world, but it was definitely one of the top 3. It was fast, stable, and the ticket price was very affordable. If you were used to taking high-speed rail in China, it would be hard to get used to going to the United States. This was because the trains in the United States were really slow. There were also high-speed rail in the United States. The speed was faster than trains and cars, but not by much. Most importantly, the price would make you feel that it was better to buy a plane. In the United States, the ticket price for a cross-state high-speed rail was more than $150, which was more than 1,000 RMB. This was only for the cross-state high-speed rail. If you were to cross a few states, it would cost more than $200 or $300. It was very expensive. Other than high-speed rail, the basic subway in the cities was not very good in the United States. Take New York, the largest city in the United States, as an example. If you were to walk around New York City, there were no escalators at all. People had to walk up and down the subway. Of course, there were some places that had them, but most of them did not. In China, after getting off the subway, you would see a row of automatic ticket vending machines. 4 to 5 of them were the basic ones, and there were also places that sold tickets manually. But in New York, there were only 3 ticket vending machines. One of them only accepted coins, and one of them was a place that was similar to the United States. Only one of them was operating normally. So, you would often see long queues at the automatic ticket vending machines during working hours. The only advantage was that there was no need for security checks. But for some people who were afraid of death, they did not feel safe without security checks. There was another difference between the United States and Wuxia. Online payment was rare in the United States. For example, Alipay was rare in the United States, but it was not very useful. When you are eating or shopping, you can swipe your card or pay with cash. but Alipay was rarely used. The United States and Europe's capitalist countries mostly rely on cash to circulate in society. If people have money but don't spend it, how can they live? They rely on these things to make money. However, the situation within the country was a little different. The country had the final say, not the capitalists. They needed to keep more money in the bank and use it for construction instead of printing money. Everyone knew what inflation was. It was the printing of too much money. Wuxia had always been very cautious in this regard. They had been controlling all the exchange rates. Once the exchange rate between USD and RMB was low, it would be suppressed at around 6 p.m. When the exchange rate was about 5 renminbi, the exchange rate would rise to 7 renminbi again. This was very important to ensure the foreign exchange rate. That was why virtual currencies were so popular in China. Who had not used WeChat to transfer money? Who had not used Alipay to pay for meals? It seemed that the money was still your money and it was very convenient. But the government's money in the bank could not be used. For the government, it was just a matter of left hand to right hand. Well, the topic had digressed. In short, Jiang Hai's mother-in-law could not go to Beijing. Then go to Jiang Hai's place? Ah. Other than laughing awkwardly, there was no other adjective. Go there for what? See how messed up her son-in-law was? Stop joking. That was why Jiang Hai looked at Fu Yuan as if he was an idiot. Fu Yuan also felt that he had said something wrong and laughed awkwardly. After soaking for a while, the three went to take a bath. After rubbing the mud off their bodies, they added bath salts and went to the sauna to steam themselves. Jiang Hai and the others also came out after washing themselves. However, they didn't rush to go back. Instead, they went upstairs to steam themselves. At the same time, they massaged their feet. Don't get it wrong, it wasn't a sword or anything like that. It was just a normal massage. After everything was done, Jiang Hai and the others also left the bath center. Because they had just finished rubbing the skewers before taking a bath, they didn't want to meet up again. They just went back directly. Jiang Hai also went to the side of his flashy red Ferrari. He had no choice. The Qi family only had 3 cars in Bing City. A Rolls-Royce was the main car and it was left in the main house. There was also a BMW which was left in the hospital. If anyone had anything to do in the hospital, they could use it. The last car was Qi Li's Ferrari, so Jiang Hai had to go back and drive it. Fortunately, Jiang Hai could also drive the red Ferrari. Anyway, he did not need this car to pick up girls. After chatting for a while, the 3 of them got into their respective cars, started the engine and went back to their homes. While driving, Jiang Hai was also thinking about how to solve the problem. But just as Jiang Hai was thinking, a person suddenly appeared from the side of the road and directly lay down 20 meters in front of Jiang Hai's car. F***CK. Looking at the person who suddenly appeared, Jiang Hai could not help but step on the brakes. This car was indeed a good car. Originally, Jiang Hai was not driving very fast. After sliding forward for 4 or 5 meters, he stopped. The person saw that Jiang Hai had stopped a little far away and was still moving towards him. Looking at the person's actions on the dashboard, Jiang Hai could not help but laugh. Then he took out his mobile phone and prepared to call the police. What else was there to say? Chapter 1041. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to make a phone call, a group of people suddenly rushed out from the grass in the distance. This group of people seemed to have more than 20 people. They were all carrying some wooden blocks, pipes and the like in their hands. They surrounded him aggressively. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't have to think to know what these people meant. At the moment, Jiang Hai was not polite. Although he didn't know who wanted to scheme against him, he was sure that these people were targeting him. There was no need to say anything at the moment. Jiang Hai put the car in gear and was ready to go directly, but when he looked back, he found that a van behind him was rushing directly toward him. It seemed that these people were ready to kill him. There was a van blocking the road behind. There were people lying in front of him to blackmail him. There were also people surrounding him. Needless to say, the police must have arranged it. If he rushed directly and killed people, he would definitely be arrested. It seemed like these people had planned for him in great detail. But if they really want to fight, then Jiang Hai didn't care. There were no guns in China. Without guns, these rotten sweet potatoes and stinky eggs want to deal with him? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai turned on the camera function in his glasses, then pushed open the door and walked out. Oh, you dare to come out. I thought you had to be a coward inside. Seeing Jiang Hai walk out, the van over there also stopped and 6 or 7 people came down from it. Among these people, there was a fat man wearing a big gold chain and a pair of sunglasses even in the dark. He looked at Jiang Hai and grinned, saying with a smile, "Coward? If you touch my car, I have to repair it. It's very troublesome. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai chuckled and then said to him indifferently, Hee hee, I guess you don't have a chance to repair it. Go. Let's beat him up first. Hearing Jiang Hai's understatement, the fat man waved his hand. There were almost 40 underlings inside and outside, all of them rushing over while cursing. However, Jiang Hai just chuckled. He flashed in front of a person and deliberately let his hand graze him. Then Jiang Hai directly punched him. The huge impact directly smashed the man's nose into his face. At the same time, his body was like a sandbag, directly hitting the people behind him and knocking them down. But Jiang Hai didn't stop at this time. He turned to the other side and dodged an iron pipe from the man in front of him. Jiang Hai's leg swept directly on the man's stomach. This kick directly kicked the man in the air. His eyes and tongue bulged out. When he fell to the ground, he had lost his combat power. Jiang Hai had already jumped over this guy and flashed into the crowd behind him. Jiang Hai's combat power was extremely strong. In addition, he had received professional training. How could these unorthodox people be his opponents? Jiang Hai was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Many of them were knocked down. Although they all had weapons in their hands, they couldn't resist Jiang Hai's fists, feet, elbows, and knees. They really lost their combat power when they were hit. It was normal for their bones to be broken. In a flash, 1/3 of this small group of about 40 people had lost their combat power because of Jiang Hai. They either fainted directly or lay on the ground screaming while holding their stomachs, arms, and legs. It was said that the soft feared the hard feared the tyrannical, and the tyrannical feared those who didn't care about their lives. Jiang Hai wasn't someone who didn't care about his life, it was just that his strength was too high, so high that these people had no way to imagine it. Therefore, the remaining 20 or so people hesitated at this time, including those gangsters who were overwhelmed by that person at the beginning. They saw with their own eyes the miserable state of the first person who was beaten by Jiang Hai. It was estimated that he would definitely not be able to survive in the future. Therefore, these people were now afraid. They were very hesitant to move forward. What are you afraid of? He is only one person. We will tire him to death. Take out your weapons. Fatty, who was hiding at the back of the crowd, saw this situation and roared loudly. Hearing his words, these people also threw away the water pipes, wooden blocks, and the like in their hands, and then took out flashing switchblades from their pockets. Seeing that these people still dared to use sharp weapons, Jiang Hai smiled. In that case, he would leave a deep impression on them. Seeing these people rushing over with switchblades, Jiang Hai used his foot to pick up 2 water pipes. Then he hit them like a storm. The water pipes were metal, not plastic. This kind of iron pipe could directly break a person's head if it was used by ordinary people, not to mention Jiang Hai. In an instant, those iron pipes fell on these people like raindrops. But unlike raindrops, when these iron pipes fell, they were bound to break bones, whether it was the head, the shoulders, or the chest. Jiang Hai alone suppressed more than 20 people and beat them up. These people did not expect Jiang Hai to be so violent. The 5 or 6 people who rushed up in front were instantly smashed to the ground by Jiang Hai. Looking at their sunken heads or obviously bent arms and shoulders, these people were afraid again. In a street fight like this, courage was the most important. These people were not soldiers. They had no faith. They only bullied the weak and feared the strong. It was not easy to use the knife to build up their courage, but at this time it was all gone. Some of the people at the back who were originally timid kept retreating. But even if they retreated, Jiang Hai did not mean to let them go. He still fought all the way. Bang 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 bang. The sound of the water pipes hitting the flesh stimulated Jiang Hai's blood and inspired the fear of these people. No one knew who was the first to scream, but that person quickly ran back and the rest of the people followed suit. But if you ran, Jiang Hai would not let you go. Don't chase a cornered enemy? This sentence did not apply to Jiang Hai. After going up, they still fought. When Jiang Hai killed his way to the van, there were only 2 people left. One was the fat man and the other was the van driver. The fat man was completely dumbfounded at this time. In the past, he had only heard that one person could fight against 100 people. He just smiled disdainfully and thought that it was all nonsense. How could there be such a terrifying person in this world? One person could fight against 100 people? One person could not even fight against 10 people, okay? But today Jiang Hai taught him a lesson. Although he did not fight against 100 people today, there were more than 40 people. Now all of them were lying on the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive, or they were holding their injured parts and screaming. The scene was like a scene from hell. The fat man and the driver were completely frightened at this time. They stood there and did not know what to do. But Jiang Hai was not going to be polite. He went up with a stick and directly smashed the fat man's right hand. The fat man also screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Say what happened today. Another iron pipe was placed in front of the fat man's left hand, and Jiang Hai said calmly. I don't know. Covering his right hand, the fat man was still preparing to be stubborn, but unfortunately Jiang Hai's iron pipe had already come down. With another bang, the fat man's left hand also hung down unconsciously. Ah! With both hands broken, the fat man could only scream powerlessly. Jiang Hai did not mean to ask again. He picked up the iron pipe again, and with 2 more bangs the fat man's legs were also broken in an instant. His whole body lay powerlessly on the cold asphalt road. His screams had already made his throat hoarse. The next stick will hit your head. Whether you die or not depends on your luck. Now I will ask you for the second time. What happened? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai stepped on his head with his foot. While grinding his head hard, he said to the fat man, I really don't know. I am Brother Zhao's subordinate. Big brother, I have eyes but fail to recognize Mount Tai. Big brother, let this little brother go. Hearing that Jiang Hai was going to smash his head directly, the fat man was really scared. At the same time, there was a smell of urine on his pants, and he also spoke intermittently. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was happy. I don't King know any Brother Zhao at all. You came to find trouble with me for no reason? You want to use this reason to dismiss me? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, and the iron pipe was directly knocked over. In an instant, it hit the fat man's head. In an instant, the fat man no longer screamed because he had fainted. Then Jiang Hai raised his foot and looked at the driver in the distance. The driver knelt down in an instant. Big brother, I am only responsible for driving. They originally asked me to hit your car. You see, I didn't hit your car. This has nothing to do with me, big brother. By the way, I may know who wants to deal with you. Looking at Jiang Hai, the driver slapped his mouth and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows also raised. I am Brother Zhao's driver. I remember this afternoon, a person surnamed Qi came to look for Brother Zhao. That person surnamed Qi owes Brother Zhao 10 million yuan. I don't know what they said, but Brother Zhao arranged this tonight. It really has nothing to do with me, big brother. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, the man also shouted loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also frowned. Suddenly he thought of a person and a matter in his mind. It seemed that Du Ning, Qi Li or Jing Xiua had said that on the morning of his mother-in-law's hospitalization, Qi Yuanlong had called his mother-in-law and said that Qi Zhengtao was detained by others. 10 million yuan surnamed Qi. Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. It seems that the person behind this has been found. Chapter 1042. Woo. The alarm rang. Hearing the alarm, the driver fell to the ground weakly. He knew that he had survived. Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and called Qi Li and Azalina. He called Qi Li to protect himself with legal weapons. These people dared to directly dispatch 40 people to block him on the street, saying that they didn't have a protective umbrella. Jiang Hai himself didn't believe it. In the country, officials were the most important. No matter how rich a person was, they were just fat sheep in the eyes of the officials. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai had never considered doing business in the country. Because if he didn't do well, his own business would become someone else's. Moreover, his family would be ruined and his family would be destroyed. This old saying wasn't a joke. Without thinking, he knew that the first batch of policemen must have something to do with these people. Jiang Hai couldn't escape because if he did, he would be in trouble. Therefore he called Qi Li and asked her to find a lawyer to take responsibility. He called Azalina so that she and Wallace Shelley could find Brother Zhao. Although they didn't know whether the person behind this was Qi Yuanlong or Qi Zhengtao, Brother Zhao definitely knew. This father and son were digging their own graves. If they gave Jiang Hai something that could be used against them, would Jiang Hai still be polite? They thought too much. After the call, the policemen came over. When they saw the scene, all of them gasped. After seeing them, Jiang Hai also threw the iron pipe on the ground and lay on the ground. The policemen cooperated and detained Jiang Hai and the driver. As for the others, they were naturally sent to the hospital. Then the policemen escorted Jiang Hai and the driver to the police station. They didn't speak along the way. When they arrived at the police station, all of Jiang Hai's belongings were found, including his ID card, passport, green card, mobile phone, keys and so on. Then he was handcuffed in the interrogation room. However, these policemen were not good people. They didn't tie Jiang Hai to the chair. Instead, they tied him to the heating pipe next to Jiang Hai so that he couldn't stand up or squat down. This was also a very common method. However, Jiang Hai hadn't been handcuffed for 5 minutes when 2 policemen came in and handcuffed Jiang Hai to the chair. They were ready to interrogate him. Needless to say, this should be Qi Li starting to exert her power. Although Qi Li was stunned when she heard that her mother had fainted, she was still a strong woman. But don't forget, she was an out-and-out strong woman. As soon as she received Jiang Hai's call, she called the headquarters directly and directly used the Qi family's name to put pressure on the Ministry of Public Security in the capital. She even alarmed the National Security Bureau. After all, Jiang Hai was also on the list there. After the Ministry of Public Security received the news, they were really confused. What did the police mean by detaining the biggest shareholder of the Qi group? One had to know that Jiang Hai was only detained in a city. Although Bing City was a provincial capital, there was still the District Public Security Bureau, the Municipal Public Security Bureau, the Provincial Public Security Bureau, and then the Ministry. Petitioning from 4 different levels was really asking for too much. But this was the Qi group. After all, the capital was under the control of the emperor. The Qi group's power was quite solid there. No officials dared to commit crimes there. This was different from the emperor in Bing City. Moreover, Jiang Hai's identity was important enough. Therefore, after knowing this, the head of the Ministry of Public Security directly called the Provincial Public Security Bureau. The head of the Provincial Public Security Bureau directly called the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The people from the Municipal Public Security Bureau directly skipped the district level and called the police station. They scolded the police station without saying anything. At least, they had to let the people in the police station know who they were arresting. After learning about this situation, the head of the police station was also shocked. While he was cursing Brother Zhao in his heart, he was also a little afraid that this matter would implicate him. But now that the arrow was on the bow, he had no choice but to shoot. Even so, there was no need to think about putting on a show of strength or using violence. The other party's identity was there. If he lost even a strand of hair, his political career would be over. Therefore, he immediately sent people over to interrogate him. There was nothing else he could do. Name? The 2 policemen who came to interrogate Jiang Hai were a middle-aged man who looked a little powerful, and the other was a man who looked about 30 years old. The 2 of them took Jiang Hai off the heating pipe and handcuffed him to the chair. After that, they turned on the video and started the interrogation. But unfortunately, after they finished their questioning, Jiang Hai did not speak. "Boy, we're asking you, ma'am." The policeman in his 30s knocked on the table and said angrily, "Before my lawyer comes, I won't speak." Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai smiled and then said very indifferently, "As the old saying goes, the word official has 2 mouths, both inside and outside. There is also an old saying that the entrance of the yamen is facing the south. If you have reason but no money, don't come in." Although Jiang Hai has reason and money, if these 2 mouths are not polite to him, black and white are not things that Jiang Hai has never heard of. In order to prevent Jiang Hai from inexplicably disappearing, there are some things that he will not say too clearly. Lawyer. You have watched too many Hong Kong movies. Where did you get a lawyer? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the middle-aged policeman here said with a look of disdain, but as soon as his voice fell, there was a noise outside. Then the door of the interrogation room was pushed open, and a captain of the police station was bowing and accompanying a man in a suit. After the man walked in, he saw Jiang Hai, who was handcuffed there. "Hello, you must be Mr. Jiang." Seeing Jiang Hai sitting here, the man in black immediately walked over with a smile. He wanted to shake hands with Jiang Hai, but he found that Jiang Hai was handcuffed, and his face was a little ugly. "Hello, my name is Chen Zhengwen. I belong to the legal department of the Qi family, and I am also your current lawyer. I would like to ask everyone, what law did my client commit and why he is handcuffed here?" Looking at the people in front of him, the lawyer named Chen Zhengwen said with a serious face. Hearing his words, the policemen next to him looked at each other. It was hard to say. He is suspected of participating in a European fight, so he is detained by us. At this time, the old policeman looked at the lawyer calmly and said, "This was not wrong. Jiang Hai did get into a fight. Okay, I request to sit in on the interrogation." Hearing the other party's reason, and it seemed to be irrefutable, the lawyer here did not care. Instead, he stood directly beside Jiang Hai and said calmly. Hearing his words, the 2 people on the other side also looked at the captain who opened the door and came in. The captain just smiled and then left. What a joke, he and those people were not in the same group. He didn't need to be buried with those guys. They heard that Jiang Hai had already alerted the Ministry of Public Security, and the Municipal Bureau and the Provincial Bureau were now sending people over. This small police station could not suppress him. At this time, if he did not choose to protect himself, then he was crazy. Seeing that the captain did not care and left, the two people here could not help but feel a little headache, but they could only bite the bullet and ask Jiang Hai. But this time Jiang Hai answered very straightforwardly. With the lawyer here, he was not afraid of what traps they would set for him. Jiang Hai also explained his own situation and what happened tonight. At the same time, he also provided evidence, which was the image recorded by his glasses, to prove that he was indeed normal self-defense. Although the two policemen wanted to ask him, "How did you beat 38 people to the hospital in normal self-defense?" Among them, 23 were seriously injured, 14 were slightly injured, and one was destined to be disabled. It was the fat leader. The only one who was unscathed was the driver, but he was also scared out of his wits. But they could not say this because they did not care why Jiang Hai was so powerful. The two pieces of evidence, the camera in the car and Jiang Hai's glasses, could not be faked. These people did stop Jiang Hai first, then surrounded Jiang Hai and prepared to attack him. If there was no lawyer here, they might be vague about who attacked first and decide this matter as an attack. But now that there was a lawyer here, they could not say that. They could only finish the statement quickly. In the meantime, the people from the Provincial Bureau and the Municipal Bureau had arrived and took over the case. With Jiang Hai's special identity, he had such power. After there was no problem with the statement, Jiang Hai also signed. Because he was a victim, he could leave. "Mr. Jiang, how are you going to solve this incident?" As they walked out, the lawyer asked Jiang Cheng in a low voice how this matter should be solved. Of course, it was up to Jiang Hai to decide. If it was a strict investigation, it would have to be reduced to a small matter. It was all up to Jiang Hai to decide. After moving his wrist that was cuffed to some pain, Jiang Hai smiled. Reduced to a small matter? How was that possible? Sue them for kidnapping, murder, robbery, oh yes, and also for racketeering. Glancing at the lawyer, Jiang Hai said indifferently. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, the lawyer also nodded. He understood what Jiang Hai meant. It was to torture them to death. "I understand." Looking at Jiang Hai, the lawyer smiled calmly. He knew that this matter was also a proof of loyalty from Jiang Hai and the Qi family. If he handled it well, then he did not need to think too much about his future. Chapter 1043. Zhao Chen, you bastard. Are you trying to kill me? King bastard, come out. In the wee hours of the morning in Bingqing, before the sun came out, a man in casual clothes barged into a high-end clubhouse. After walking in, he began to shout loudly. This clubhouse also had some reputation in Bingqing. Usually it was a place where some small stars, rich second generations and the like played all night. It could be said that there was everything you wanted to play here. But even so, it was time for those who had played all night to rest. Hearing someone shouting, some people came out cursing. But when they saw that the security guards in the distance didn't dare to move, they shrank their heads back. After a while, a man in casual clothes slowly walked down the stairs. This man looked like he was 35 or 36 years old. His hair was meticulously combed and he even had a beard. He looked a little like the boss of the Axe Gang in Zhou Xingxing's Kung Fu movie, but he was more handsome and had a good figure. At this moment he was wearing a black shirt and trousers, walking over from afar with a smile on his face. If someone was in Bingqing at this time, it would not be difficult to recognize that this person's name was Zhao Chen. Compared to those people in the underworld who were either called Hu Long or Jiao, this person played much more high-end games. This person used to be a retired Special Forces soldier. After returning from the military, he followed a boss. However, because he was handsome and had a good figure, he had an affair with the boss's woman. After the boss found out, he took the initiative to kill the boss. His sister-in-law controlled all of the boss's money, so the two of them directly recruited people and bought horses. After taking over the former boss's territory with money to clear the way, and training a group of thugs according to a professional method, he gradually gained some reputation. However, after gaining some reputation, he restrained his business and opened this entertainment club. It was a place specially for the rich to pass time. Gambling, dog fighting, finding the most professional women who had lost their footing, and so on. This place was the best, so many rich second-generation officials and celebrities liked to come here to play. After so many years, he had gradually become a very influential existence in this area. As for this Chief Lu, he was under the jurisdiction of the City Public Security Bureau. He couldn't say. Anyway, it was related to him. This time he was in charge of arresting Jiang Hai. But now he was probably panicking. Chief Lu, it's still early in the morning. I'm not open for business yet. Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, the man on the other side chuckled. Upon hearing his words, Chief Lu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Business? Run your F***king business. You coward, how dare you play with me? That Jiang Hai, what's going on? Chief Lu pointed at this person and yelled at him with a face full of anger. Nothing much, just an ordinary nouveau riche. Hearing this person's words, Zhao Chen, who was in front of him, also smiled. It was not his first day in this world, so he naturally knew that there were some people he could never provoke. Therefore he usually smiled at anyone. If he did not investigate the other party's background clearly, he would not make a move. Jiang Hai's background was very easy to investigate. Since young he had been an ordinary loser. When he was young he was not good at his studies. His parents died early and later he just stayed at home. Although there were rumors that he was married to the eldest daughter of the Qi family. However, according to his understanding, that eldest miss had never taken her seriously. If she took him seriously he should have stayed in the capital and not Bing City. Later on he heard that 3 years ago he went to the United States and started raising cattle. Maybe he earned some money from raising cattle? However, in his eyes they were just ordinary nouveau riche. Nouveau riche? I'll break your legs. Nouveau riche is the biggest shareholder of the Qi family? Nouveau riche can alarm the Public Security Bureau. Nouveau riche can let the Provincial Department and the City Public Security Bureau take over the case after an hour. And investigate thoroughly? Look at the crimes of your subordinates. Robbery, murder, kidnapping. You're telling me that he's a nouveau riche. Hearing Zhao Chen's words, Chief Lu instantly exploded. As he jumped, he pointed at his nose and scolded. After hearing what he said, a trace of surprise flashed across Zhao Chen's face, but he quickly covered it up. Let me tell you. The person you're looking for trouble with is called Jiang Hai. His small ranch is worth tens of billions of dollars. He does business directly with a country. He has business dealings with Europe, the Middle East, Australia, South Korea, Japan, and even Wuxia. Even the imperial court has to beg him to do things. You're telling me that he's a nouveau riche? Let me tell you, if I'm finished you'll die too. Your whole family will die. Chief Lu looked at Zhao Chen and pointed at him as he spoke. There's no need to be so anxious. No matter how strong he is, his forces are all overseas. Even if he has them in the country, they're in the imperial capital. A strong dragon can't suppress a local snake. I have plenty of ways to settle this matter. You can rest assured and go back to be Chief Lu. If anything happens you don't have to do anything. I'll send my head up myself. You're courting death. Seeing Zhao Chen's confident look, Chief Lu had no other choice but to believe him. After pointing at him he turned around and left. If others saw him entering and leaving such a place, it would be troublesome. After Chief Lu left, Zhao Chen still had a smile on his face as he walked into his room. However, as soon as he entered the room, he slumped to the ground. His calmness just now was all an act. He never thought that he would actually offend such a big shot. The cause of the matter was all because of Qi Jingtao. After Qi Song and Qi Jingtao caused trouble in the first month, only Qi Jingtao's wife, Lucy, returned to the Qi family to work. Qi Jingtao's family stayed in Bingqing. They had nothing to do when they returned to the imperial capital, right? As for Qi Jingtao, without his wife to control him, he was even more free. All day long he went to some high-class clubs with a group of bad friends. He often came to this entertainment club, but in the past he was only lustful and didn't gamble. Although being lustful was harmful to the body, compared to the other two of the three poisons, it wasn't that expensive. Even if it was a high-class girl, it would only cost 30,000 to 50,000 yuan a night, including alcohol. He could afford it. Moreover, after playing once he would definitely sober up the next day, so he wouldn't be able to play the next day. On the third day he might be a little lightheaded and wouldn't be able to play. At most he would only play twice a week. For Qi Yuanlong's family, spending 60,000 to 70,000 yuan a week wasn't a big deal. However, recently Qi Jingtao might have wanted to play more excitedly and got involved in gambling. That was troublesome. This thing was big. Sometimes he would throw in a handful of 100,000 or 80,000 yuan. However, he couldn't take out Qi Yuanlong's money. Slowly, over the past few months he owed this entertainment club 10 million yuan. After playing the night before yesterday he was detained here by Zhao Chen. Of course he didn't beat or scold him. He only called Qi Yuanlong. Only then did Qi Yuanlong find out that his son was involved in gambling. He explained that he was a shareholder of the Qi family and that his son was the young master of the Qi family. He didn't have to worry about the money. Only then did he call Jiang Hai's mother-in-law, causing her illness. And yesterday Qi Jingtao came over and directly paid off the 10 million yuan. This was the money that Qi Yuanlong had gathered for him. His family's fortune was almost gone. After paying off the 10 million yuan, Zhao Chen's attitude was much better. Moreover, he believed that Qi Jingtao was the young master of the Qi family. Then he told Zhao Chen that 10 million yuan was nothing to the Qi family, which had a market value of tens of billions. However, he had been a little annoyed recently, so he always came here to gamble. He said that Jiang Hai was Qi Li's little husband. He didn't have any ability. For the sake of his wife, he came to their family all day long to cause trouble. He wanted to teach Jiang Hai a lesson, so he told Zhao Chen that he wanted to capture Jiang Hai or give Jiang Hai a good beating. At the very least, he wanted him to stop criticizing him. If the matter was successful, he could let Zhao Chen invest. With money, everyone could make money together. After Zhao Chen finished investigating the situation of the Qi family, he was quite tempted. No matter how successful he was now, he was only a hooligan. He couldn't be seen in public. Even the director of a police station could get him in. However, if he became a shareholder of the Qi family, it would be different. However, he was careful by nature, so he still checked Jiang Hai's situation. However, how could he find out about the situation of Jiang Hai's higher-ups and the situation abroad? At most, he could only send some underlings to look for people Jiang Hai knew. He couldn't look for those good friends. He could only look for those classmates who were far away, former colleagues, neighbors in the community, and so on. They knew nothing. His classmates only knew that Jiang Hai had bought a manor to raise cattle in the United States. The internet said every day that one could buy a farm in the United States with a few 100,000 yuan. They estimated that Jiang Hai was at the same level. At this age, which young man would be convinced by a guy who didn't rely on his father? Even if Jiang Hai told them that he made tens of billions of dollars a year, they wouldn't believe it. Moreover, Jiang Hai wouldn't tell them. As for his neighbors and colleagues, they didn't even know. It was precisely because he understood the situation that Zhao Chen dared to make a move on Jiang Hai, who knew that it was over. He had kicked an iron plate. What he said to Chief Lu just now was just to calm him down. In reality, he was already at his wits' end. After calming down, he hurriedly stood up, then quickly went to his safe and took out all the cash and jewelry. Then he went directly to the garage downstairs from the room's back door. He drove a very inconspicuous Chevrolet and was about to leave. However, just as his car turned out and drove less than 2 blocks on a narrow road, 2 cars, one in front and one behind, directly stopped him. Then 2 foreign girls came out of the car with a trace of disdain on their faces. Chapter 1044. Boss, I brought him. Carrying a man with a weak body and a black cloth bag over his head, Azalina walked into a dilapidated factory building that was leaking air everywhere. At this time, a person was sitting in the factory. To be exact, it was a man. This man was none other than Jiang Hai. Looking at the person who was brought over in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. Hello. Walking in front of him, Jiang Hai took the bag off his head. When he saw that it was Jiang Hai, the man couldn't help but regret it. He didn't expect Jiang Hai to be so fast. Big brother, I have eyes but fail to recognize Mao Tai. If I have offended you, please show me the way. Lowering his head, Zhao Chen was not an ordinary person. In such a situation, he did not panic too much and was still negotiating with Jiang Hai. You should be glad that this is Wuxia. This is Ice City and there is no sea here. If you were in the United States, you would have already been fed to the sharks. But to be honest, even in Wuxia, it is not difficult for me to kill you. You are an existence in the underground world. Even if you die, no one will seek justice for you, don't you think so? Looking at Zhao Chen in front of him, Jiang Hai bent down with a smile and looked at the guy with a bruised nose and swollen face. It seemed that when he came over, he had been beaten up badly by Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Indeed, since he dared to attack Jiang Hai, it would be strange if they did not explode. Big brother, I think you also know that I was used as a tool by others in this matter. I don't know how capable you are. If you have any orders, just tell me directly. If I can do it, I will definitely do it. Do you want money, my family property, or anything else? Just say the word. Looking at Jiang Hai, Zhao Chen forced himself to raise his head and said while panting heavily. But don't worry, I don't want your money and I don't want your land. The money is mine. That money is something you can't even dream of. Come on, let me ask you a question first. Who is the person behind this? Looking at Zhao Chen, since he was so tactful, it saved Jiang Hai a lot of trouble. The person behind me is Chief Lu of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The person who attacked you is a guy called Qi Jingtao. He said that he is the young master of the Qi family. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Qin immediately told him about the person behind him and the person who ordered him to attack Jiang Hai. TSK, I knew it was this guy. But you're really stupid. Do you really believe everything he says? Don't you know how to investigate it yourself? The person in charge of the Qi family is Qi Jingtao? Hearing him say it so straightforwardly, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This time the target was confirmed. It seemed that the person who was causing trouble behind the scenes was Qi Yuanlong's family. Ha he he. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Zhao Qin smiled awkwardly. If it weren't for the investigation, he wouldn't have dared to make a move. It was precisely because of the investigation that Jiang Hai wasn't a strong person that he dared to make a move. In the end, who knew that he would kick an iron plate this time, and it was quite solid. Now, his little life was in the hands of the other party. I'm a narrow-minded person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Logically speaking, since you sent more than 40 people to trouble me, you're dead meat. Whether or not your family will be implicated is also up to me. However, seeing that you're so smart now, I really can't beat you to death with a stick. Tell me, what reason do you have for me to let you go? Don't talk about money, don't talk about things. I don't lack money, so I don't lack anything that can be bought with money, including your life. Hearing Zhao Chen's words, Jiang Hai squatted down and looked at him as he spoke slowly. In fact, according to his character, it was impossible to cut the grass without removing the roots, but he couldn't do it easily. This was Wuxia, not the United States. If someone really wanted to touch Jiang Hai in Wuxia, they only lacked a reason. Jiang Hai did not believe that there were no big shots in Wuxia who were interested in Jiang Hai's beef, Jiang Hai's fish, and Jiang Hai's forage formula. Why didn't they dare to touch Jiang Hai? Or send a staff member or something to come and tell Jiang Hai that he had to offer the formula in his hands for the rise of China. In the future he would be a hero of Wuxia or something like that. Why didn't they do that? This was because Jiang Hai's main business was abroad. However, if he had any trouble in the country, these people wouldn't let him go. Although Jiang Hai helped the country to connect with Dubai, they still wouldn't let him go. In the face of benefits, it didn't matter whether you had made contributions in the past or not. This was because contributions did not offset mistakes or contributions offset mistakes. It was just a sentence from the higher-ups. People were unequal from the moment they were born. There was no need to be unconvinced. This was the truth. I'll turn myself in. I have a video of me talking to that person. I'll turn myself in. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Qin was on his way. Compared to dying, it might be much better to turn himself in. He had money, so as long as he was not sentenced to death immediately, he had a way to survive. As long as he took on this matter, regardless of whether he was in prison for 10 or 15 years, he would be a good man again when he came out. As for Qi Jingtao, he naturally would not let him have an easy time. Okay, I'll wait for the news of you turning yourself in. You have 4 hours. After 4 hours, if I don't hear this news, you can say goodbye to this world forever. Looking at the time, it was only 6 o'clock in the morning. Jiang Hai pointed to the time above and said to Zhao Qin. Then he gave Azalina a look. Azalina was not polite. Azalina directly pulled this guy to put on the hood again and brought him back to her car. After throwing him to the place where he was caught, Azalina also drove away. When Zhao Qin pulled off the cloth on his head, he looked at the familiar car in front of him. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. He thought about running away, but judging from the situation just now, if he drove out of the city now, he would probably be seen again in Songjiang if others saw him again. He was very sure that Jiang Hai was not joking because the murderous intent in Jiang Hai's eyes just now was quite condensed. This proved that this person had at least a few or even dozens of lives on his hands. He naturally would not care about one more life. Although he did not know why he wanted to use the weapon of law to deal with him and Qi Jingtao, he did not dare to resist. After getting back into the car and starting the engine, Zhao Qin returned to his clubhouse. After going upstairs, he pondered for half an hour and then started to make calls. He wanted to call the people who were related to him. Then he started to use it. Then he took the video of his conversation with Qi Jingtao and went to the municipal bureau to turn himself in. Originally, the people from the municipal bureau and the provincial bureau were still there interrogating. They had just found out that the person behind it was Zhao Qin and were about to deploy. When they were about to arrest him, Zhao Qin turned himself in and told everyone that the person behind it was Qi Jingtao. After learning about this matter, the people from the municipal bureau also acted very quickly. After all, there were people from above keeping an eye on it. They immediately drove to Qi Yuanlong's house. At this time, Qi Yuanlong's family still did not know what had happened. Qi Yuanlong had just sold everything he had yesterday to help his son pay off the 10 million gambling debt. The whole family was waiting for the news there. In the end, they had just woken up this morning. Before the news came, the police came and directly arrested Qi Zhengtao. The charge was suspected of kidnapping and murdering Jiang Hai. When he heard the news, Qi Yuanlong was stunned. Zhang Yu was already prepared to run away. She knew that Jiang Hai's revenge was coming. Now it was Qi Zhengtao. Later it might be her. If she did not run now, she would be dead. Thinking of this, Zhang Yu became even more flustered. After Qi Zhengtao was taken away by the police, Qi Yuanlong immediately went to the hospital. He wanted to beg Jiang Hai for help. He did not think about what would happen if his son really succeeded. He only knew that his son could not go to jail. Nothing could happen to him. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not think so. Unfortunately, when he arrived at the hospital, he did not see Jiang Hai or even Qi Li's mother. This was because Jiang Hai had already taken them to his villa. Even if Qi Yuanlong went to the Qi family's mansion to look for them, he would not be able to find them. Just as he was looking all over the world for Jiang Hai, Zhang Yu took the rest of the family's money and ran away. Unfortunately, did you really think that she could run away? On the way to the airport, Zhang Yu's car brakes failed and she hit the roadside fence. It was similar to the reason why the family died. However, the result was different. Because there were no cliffs or anything like that in Bingqing City, the fence pierced through the car window, got into the car, and directly penetrated her. No one knew how long she had lived, but the way she died was quite tragic. When Qi Yuanlong, who was looking for Jiang Hai's family, heard the news, he was in a bad mood. He sat on the road dispiritedly and began to cry. This was how people were. When they were looking for death, they did not think that they were looking for death. They thought that they were creating history. Only when they really looked for death did they realize that they were really looking for death, and there was nothing they could do about it. If Qi Yuanlong had not been so ambitious, if he had educated Qi Zhengtao well, if he had not had any improper thoughts after his brother's death, perhaps he would still have a position on the board of directors. The most important thing for a person was not talent but mentality. You had to know when and where to stand. Wuxia people always talked about the golden mean. In fact, the golden mean was also the essence of human life. However, in this slightly exaggerated world, everyone fought for the first place in everything. People only saw the first place drinking and eating meat but did not see the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. 100 people died. Was it really so easy to achieve a success rate of 1 in 10,000 or even 1 in a million? Chapter 1045. Hugh. Lying on Jiang Hai's chest, Qi Li was constantly gasping for breath. At the same time, she slowly moved her legs. The battle just now made her legs tired. Jiang Hai moved the hair on her face because of sweat to the side. Looking at her beautiful face, Jiang Hai gently kissed her forehead, and Qi Li also smiled sweetly. Hugh, you didn't do that just now? Looking up at Jiang Hai, Qi Li asked in a low voice. Oh, I already did that, this is the second time. Although Qi Li's words were not very clear, Jiang Hai understood what she was talking about. He chuckled and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also nodded. That's good. Mom has been urging us to have a child. You have to plant your seed in the right place. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li said with a smile. At the same time, she gently moved and felt something still in her body. She couldn't help but pinch Jiang Hai's waist and then glanced at him. Go find those little girls. Remember to come back in the morning. Also, don't be found by Mom and Xiui. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head. I still have a lot of opportunities with them, but I don't have much time with you. Let's sleep like this. Hugging Qi Li, Jiang Hai said slowly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li was touched. After lightly hitting Jiang Hai, she didn't say anything. She just lay there and her breathing gradually stabilized. What do you think will happen to third uncle's family in the future? Hearing Jiang Hai's powerful heartbeat, Qi Li suddenly asked him. What else can we do? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai knew that she was being sentimental again. He couldn't help but pat her to stop her from thinking about this matter. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, she also smiled and closed her mouth. Since the incident that day, Qi Yuanlong's family was completely finished. Zhang Yu was dead and Qi Zhengtao was arrested and sent to prison. According to Jiang Hai's request, he was tortured to death. This time, Qi Zhengtao would probably not be able to get out of prison for 8 to 10 years. Moreover, even if he stayed there for 10 or 8 years, he might not be able to come out. Don't forget that Zhao Qian had also gone in. Would he let Qi Zhengtao, this fellow who had harmed him, off so easily? You don't have to think with your toes to know that it's impossible. After knowing this, Chili still felt a little emotional. After all, they were real relatives. That was her father's younger brother. Although he did it himself, she still couldn't bear to see him in such a miserable state. Okay. After a while, you can take 3/1000 of the shares and give them to your third uncle. You can give him dividends for his retirement, but you have no right to control them. Looking at Chi Li's appearance, Jiang Hai sighed. Women really can't harden their hearts. Really? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li's eyes widened and she said with a smile. Well, okay, don't think about it now. Tomorrow, Fu Yuan said that he would have a barbecue at his house. Have you thought about what to bring? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also changed the topic. Now is not the time to think about those things. Beef, I marinated it with little ya in the afternoon. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li also said with a smile. Only beef? Isn't it a little too little? Looking at Chi Li, Jiang Hai asked with some concern. What else do you want to bring? You have to sell those things for money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li couldn't help but pout. Okay, you have the final say. Shrugging, Chi Li is here, so let her have the final say. Women are really stingy. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai and Chi Li drove away under the envious eyes of Chi Jia and Chi Ya. This was the 6th day since Jiang Hai returned to Bing City. The first 3 days were used to deal with things, and the second 3 days were used to take care of his mother-in-law. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that his mother-in-law would have to have an operation this time, but unexpectedly it was useless. Perhaps it was because she still had the foundation of eating beef and seafood in the past. After taking out some of the frozen beef and seafood that Jing Xiuyi had not thrown away in time to cook, the old lady's heart gradually returned to the right track. As long as it can be temporarily pulled back, Jiang Hai's aura will be able to cure the old lady's illness. The old lady's illness gradually improved, and Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. Chia had been teaching Jing Xiuyi how to cook these days and how to take care of the old lady. Chi Jia was a doctor, so naturally she had to stay at home. As Alina, Wallace Shelley, and Du Ning had nothing to do, so they all lived in Jiang Hai's villa. Jiang Hai and Chi Li were relatively free. According to the old lady's original plan, Jiang Hai and Chi Li should go back. However, Jiang Hai didn't dare to wait for Chi Jia and the others, so he could only wait here. As for Chi Li, since Jiang Hai was in China, she was not in a hurry to go back. At present, the Qi group was slowly on the right track. She controlled the Qi group from afar, so there would be no problems. Recently, she had been training people to take over the Qi group. It might not be very convincing if she said it out loud. The person she was most optimistic about was LVC. However, after this incident, it was estimated that even if LVC didn't hold a grudge against her, Chi Li would no longer believe her. Therefore, they had to look for new talents and nurture them anew. This was not an easy task. If she wanted to train people, she was destined to be separated from Jiang Hai for a short time. In this case, how could she not seize the opportunity to stay by Jiang Hai's side, even if it was only for a minute? Therefore, she was very close to Jiang Hai these days. Except for the time when Jiang Hai went to the bathroom, she even followed him to take a bath. She was not shy. It was precisely because he knew her inner thoughts that Jiang Hai didn't leave last night. Today's party was booked when Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan went to take a bath that day. Jiang Hai's friends must have a gathering when he came back. Fu Yuan bought a house 2 years ago. It was a ready-made house, but he didn't live in it. Because the community hadn't been repaired yet, the supporting materials hadn't been completed, and the place was quite remote. Of course, it was only 2 years later. The place was still remote, and the things hadn't been completed yet. However, Fu Yuan wasn't in a hurry. After all, he still didn't have a girlfriend that he was going to get married to. But in the past few years, whether he was pretending or not, the renovation of his house had also been completed. Since Jiang Hai had come back and everyone was present, he decided to go to his house and have a look. It could be considered as a celebration. For a new house like this, people would come over to check it out. The main reason was to add some liveliness to the house and ask the guests, who originally lived in the house, to leave. Of course, this was also the old man's way of saying. However, there seemed to be some reason behind this statement. Look at those places where people come and go all year round. For example, hospitals. You know that many people have died here, but when you go there during normal times, very few people will feel that the hospital is lifeless. Of course, there is an exception at night. As for schools, when children go to school, no one will feel that it is a little eerie. But when the children were out of school, the whole school was similar to a ghost house. This was also relatively typical. Although Fu Yuan didn't have such an idea, his parents believed in these things. So, he specially invited Jiang Hai and his friends to go over to increase the popularity. Jiang Hai and the others naturally would not come. They came over to play. Of course they had to come. Driving the BMW, Jiang Hai and Qi Li brought 10 pounds of beef to Fu Yuan's new house. To be honest, the place of his new house was indeed very remote. The community was in the north, south, east, and west. There were only things in the east and south. In the east there was a community that was being built. There was also a ski resort inside. It was the kind that was indoor and very high-end. The south was the road. His community was at the head of this area. There was also a new community opposite. In the north and west there was a large wilderness. There weren't even trees. It was all grass that was half a person's height. It wasn't the first time Jiang Hai came. The last time he came he said that if Fu Yuan and his wife were tired of playing at home in the future, they could go there to play. Along the way there were a lot of people. Basically they were all renovated. There were also a lot of cars. Some were private and some were for transporting goods. But in this neighborhood the supporting facilities obviously hadn't been built yet. Along the way there were a lot of cars that sold steel pipes, sanitary ware and paint. But there were very few restaurants and small supermarkets. There were only a few snack shops and the like. Fortunately, Jiang Hai and the others were already prepared, so after the car arrived and parked, Jiang Hai and Qi Li went directly to Fu Yuan's house. After pressing the doorbell and taking the elevator in, Jiang Hai found that some people had already arrived. Because of the need for popularity, there were really a lot of people who came. In addition to Jiang Hai and Qi Li, there were Su Wei, Xianghua's family of 3, Huang Yunfei and his wife, Wang Yong and his wife, Wu Ming and his wife with their 2 children. There was also a cousin of Fu Yuan. Jiang Hai had seen him before and a classmate of his. There were 14 people including the children. When they walked in it was quite lively. Several children, big or small, were running around the room in the nursery. The women all went to the kitchen to help. Wang Yong, Wu Ming, Huang Yunfei, and Su Wei were playing mahjong. Fu Yuan, his cousin, and his classmate were playing Fight the Landlord. It was quite lively. When they saw Jiang Hai and Qi Li coming, everyone looked over. Here is the beef. Cut it and marinate it. We will eat it later. Seeing Fu Yuan coming over, Jiang Hai handed the beef to him first. More than a dozen people naturally couldn't eat enough beef, but today they were not here to eat beef. Your beef, TSK, I have to leave some. Recently I have taken a fancy to a girl. Whether I can get her or not depends on your beef. Taking the beef in Jiang Hai's hand, Fu Yuan smacked his lips. He knew that Jiang Hai's thing was really fun. P.S. I recommend a buddy's new book, My Portable World of Mixed Farmers. It is a very good farming book. Friends who are out of books can go and read it. The author is Dong De Peo, who is known as the Yuewen self-driving cannon. He is a super experienced driver, the racing god of Mount Akina. He can recite all kinds of vegetables, fruit seeds and army numbers. If you need, you can go and see if he has a book group. Chapter 1046. Tell me if you want to eat. I will definitely support your marriage. Do it today. Drive to my place to pick it up in a few days. I still have some. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai also said to him with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Fu Yuan also gave him a thumbs up and then took it to the kitchen with a smile. Naturally, there would be people working there. Although Fu Yuan didn't have a girlfriend yet, there were a lot of women who came today. It was inevitable for them to come and help. The most important thing was that they really didn't need to do anything. Fu Yuan was a bachelor, so he naturally did the simplest things. Today Jiang Hai and the others ate barbecue at noon. The best thing about Fu Yuan's house was that it was an H-shaped house. Fu Yuan's living room was facing the top floor of the lower floor, which could be used for barbecue. Of course, it was not to directly light a fire there but to use a rack. He considered that there would be a lot of people coming, so he specially prepared 2 racks, both of which were for burning charcoal. One was very wide and needed to be covered with some barbed wire to barbecue meat, roast scallops, fish and so on. The other was narrower for barbecue and barbecue skewers. Today Jiang Hai was not the only one who brought things here. Su Wei bought all the vegetables, lettuce, chives, enoki mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, onions, garlic, chili and so on. Xianghua bought chicken wings, chicken breast meat, and a bottle of white wine. Huang Yunfei carried 2 bottles of red wine and a bucket of oysters. Of course, this game should not be comparable to the one Jiang Hai ate at Old Clive's place during the Poseidon ritual. This was just the most common kind of oyster. Because it was not the time for oysters to be produced, the price was slightly more expensive, 5 yuan per tael. Well, this game should not be expensive. Wang Yong bought skewers of mutton and beef. He didn't know if they were real, but he bought a lot of them. There were also some ham sausages and so on. Wu Ming prepared beer. 3 boxes of beer, 1 box of 12 bottles. These men had enough to drink today. In addition to the 10 pounds of beef brought by Jiang Hai, they could eat what they couldn't eat. Naturally, the host, Fu Yuan, had prepared a lot of things including frozen fish and prawns. After Jiang Hai and Qi Li came in, Qi Li was very sensible. She took off her coat and went into the kitchen to see if there was anything she could help with. But to be honest, although Jiang Hai and the others were buddies, when women were together the most important thing was to fight. However, they could not get into a fight with Qi Li. How could they? She was the leader of a billion-dollar company, and her husband was worth tens of billions of dollars. He was good-looking, rich, and educated, so there was nothing to argue about. What was there to be cocky about? You see, my husband bought me a diamond ring and my husband bought me a coat, right? She said. Qi Li's jewelry might not be comparable to all their jewelry added together. There was no comparison. Therefore, after Qi Li went to the kitchen, she was assigned the easiest task, which was to tear the enoki mushroom. It didn't need to be too big, just one piece at a time. Then they talked to each other. The topic also changed from what our family bought, what my husband bought for me, to what are the trends of this year, what are the fun things on the internet recently, and the various bad habits of my husband. Well, women's topics were always very sharp. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. Jiang Hai sat next to Fu Yuan and watched him play the game. Fu Yuan, his classmate, and his cousin's skills were good because they always played, but they didn't play much. At least in Jiang Hai's opinion, he shouldn't be able to beat them. After playing for a while, Xianghua also coaxed the child to sleep and joined in. Because there were more people, everyone played Texas together. Of course, they also played some money, but it wasn't much. The minimum was 1 yuan and the highest was 5 yuan. Winning or losing was only a few hundred yuan. Now Jiang Hai and the others didn't care about the few hundred yuan. Because it was 10 o'clock when Jiang Hai and the others went out, it was 10 o'clock. When they arrived, it was 10 o'clock. After playing for less than an hour, it was almost time to eat. After they finished, everyone went outside to the platform. The dishes were served one by one. Today's chief chefs were Su Wei and Wang Yong. The two liked to study how to make food by themselves. Each of them was guarding a stove, and the charcoal had already been raised. Now they could directly roast it. But when they were waiting for the first pot, Fu Yuan also took out some dried fruits from the house for everyone to eat. After Jiang Hai helped to move the wine tables and other things, he had nothing to do. He just happened to see Qi Li sitting there eating pine nuts. He walked over and grabbed a handful of pine nuts to eat. After eating 2, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The taste of pine nuts was not bad. The Northeast was rich in pine nuts. Many pine nuts from all over the country were shipped from the Northeast. Every new year, in fact, even the people in the Northeast would buy some pine nuts. Outsiders knew that the Northeast had 3 treasures: ginseng, mink, and deer antler. But in fact, in the Northeast, ginseng was a toy. To be honest, 99% of the ginseng was farmed. Its medicinal effect was not much different from radishes. Mink fur was also very expensive in the Northeast. A mink fur was easily sold for 20 to 30,000 yuan. Deer antler was sold in a lot, but Jiang Hai had never eaten it. Instead, he ate it for the first time after going to the United States. Compared to the things above, the Northeast people were more used to the Northeast specialties: pine nuts, hazelnuts, wood ears, mushrooms, and so on. Especially wood ears. To be honest, if one was used to eating wood ears in the Northeast, they might not be used to eating them outside. The same was true for pine nuts. Basically, there were only 3 kinds of pine nuts in the country: Brazilian pine nuts, Northeast pine nuts, and wet pine nuts, also known as sea pine nuts. Brazilian pine nuts were also known as American pine nuts. But Jiang Hai knew that there were no pine nuts in the United States. There were only 2 kinds of pine trees in the United States. One was American pine, and the other was American Douglas fir. The former was like the pine trees in the green belt in China. But pine nuts were not eaten. Americans mainly ate Brazilian pine nuts. They were slender and very big, but to be honest, the taste was not as good as the ones in China. Moreover, the price in China was quite expensive. The pine nuts in the Northeast were mainly red pine. This thing was not available in the United States. Other than Wuxia, only Soviet Russia and some European countries had it. Wet pine nuts mainly came from Jimimo Province and Nanyun Province. Of course, there were many pine trees that produced pine nuts, but only these 3 kinds were edible and delicious. Hey, where did you get these pine nuts? Looking at Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai couldn't help but pat him and asked with some doubts. These pine nuts were indeed delicious. They were not too oily or greasy, but the taste of pine nuts was very fragrant, making people want to eat more after eating them. Delicious, right? My classmates in my hometown brought it to me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan said with a smile. Where? Hearing him say hometown, Jiang Hai knew Fu Yuan's hometown, Madanshui City, but it produced fish. Hailin's hometown, hazelnuts are also delicious. The wood ears there are also very good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also said with a smile. Hearing him say this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. He was quite concerned about food. When you have time, take me to have a look. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai was going to take a look. If there was a place with delicious food, he always had to bring some back to his manor. Otherwise, his heart would be uncomfortable. Okay, no problem. Let's see, the day after tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also said with a smile. He also made an appointment with Jiang Hai. It was just the beginning of spring and he was not busy yet. He just had time to go back. After making an appointment, Jiang Hai and the others also began to eat. After eating dried fruits for a while, the first pot of barbecue and skewers were ready. Everyone ate first. When they were waiting for the second pot, the beer and other things were opened. There was nothing to say. Let's drink. Today these people drove a total of 4 cars. Not counting Fu Yuan's home here, there were Jiang Hai's car, Su Wei's car, Huang Yunfei's car and Wang Yong's car. Wang Yong came with Wu Ming, and Xiang Hua came with Su Wei's car. In addition to Su Wei, Huang Yunfei, Wang Yong, and Jiang Hai's wives could all drive. Naturally, there was no problem of not being able to drink. For a while they ate big pieces of meat and drank big mouthfuls of wine. It was difficult to feel the forthright feeling of the people in the northeast without going there. As Jiang Hai and the others began to eat meat, drink and brag, the atmosphere also rose steadily. Beer, white wine and red wine mixed together, and the consciousness in the head gradually disappeared, but fortunately the women were controlling the rhythm. It was okay to drink, but not to drink too much and not to drink too much to get hurt. This was the most important thing. This meal lasted from noon to evening. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the children began to make noise. Some wanted to sleep, some felt tired, some felt bored, and some wanted to go home. Only then did they disperse. Jiang Hai also drank a lot today, but with his physical fitness the alcohol was not a problem, but he was also a little dizzy, but he still let Chili drive. He leaned on the passenger seat and closed his eyes, looking at Jiang Hai sitting there. Thinking about what happened today, Chili couldn't help but chuckle. This kind of life was actually quite good. There was no intrigue in the business world and there was no deception in the family. She liked this kind of life. While driving, looking at the early evening lights outside, Chili also said softly, "If you let go of the Chi family, you can live like this every day. I heard little Jia and little Ye say that they just go to the vegetable field every day and simply eat, drink and play. This is simply the life of a god. If I met you earlier, it would be great." Chapter 1047. Click click. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Jiang Hai and Chi Li returned to Jiang Hai's home. As soon as they came in, they saw Chi Jie sitting on the sofa watching TV, swinging her long white legs. In addition to her, only Azalina and the other 2 were sitting in the distance, playing Fight the Landlord. They had nothing to do. Chia should be in the kitchen because there were some sounds in the kitchen. As for Chi Li's mother, she was still sick, so she went to bed early. Although Jing Xiu also came, she still blamed herself. Usually she would get up when Chi Li's mother woke up, and when Chi Li's mother slept, she would sleep. She rarely showed up alone. Seeing Jiang Hai and Chi Li come back, Chi Jie couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and say with a smile, "Hey, you're back. What are you talking about? Call me sister and brother-in-law." Hearing Chi Jie's words, Chi Li couldn't help but glare at her. Speaking of which, Chi Li was still angry in her heart. What was this called? 3 sisters having sex with the same person? This was really ridiculous. However, things just happened and she had no choice but to accept it. Therefore, every time she saw Chi Jie and Chia, she would definitely feel a little angry. After all, even though she accepted it, she still felt a little unhappy in her heart. Tiske. Hearing Chi Li's words, Chi Jie couldn't help but curl her lips, and then sat back on the sofa. "I'm going to take a shower first." Looking at this awkward atmosphere, Jiang Hai wanted to run away. After saying to Chi Li, he rushed upstairs. Chi Li looked at Jiang Hai's back and slowly walked upstairs. But halfway up, she suddenly stopped and looked at Du Ning in the distance. "Du Ning, you too." Chi Li waved her hand to Du Ning and went upstairs first. Hearing Chi Li's words, everyone looked at Du Ning with a smile. Du Ning also blushed, but she didn't refuse. She threw away the cards in her hand. Even if she still had 2 kings in her hand, she didn't play this round and quickly went upstairs with Qili. Qili had her reasons for thinking this way. She couldn't leave the capital for the time being. Du Ning was responsible for protecting her, so naturally he couldn't leave easily. If she were to occupy Jianghai for the next few days, wouldn't Du Ning be a little pitiful? Therefore Qili, who had never accepted staying with Jianghai in the past, made an exception today. However, when she left, she also told Du Ning to go back to her room quietly after finishing the business. She couldn't let her mother see her. Otherwise the old lady would be very sad. She didn't know how sad she would be. After arriving at Jianghai's master bedroom, Jianghai had already started to take a bath in the bathroom. After Qili and Du Ning glanced at each other, the two took off their clothes and walked into the bathroom. When Jianghai saw them, he couldn't help but smile. He took the initiative to walk over and took the two under the shower. Glancing at Jianghai, Xixian hugged Jianghai's neck and kissed him while being drenched. As for Du Ning, after kissing him, she took the initiative to squat down. There was no need to describe in detail what they were doing. The night was still long, it was a silent night. Indeed, there were no words, only some exclamations. The next morning, when Jianghai and Qili woke up, there were only the two of them. After washing up, Jianghai and the others didn't go anywhere today. They just stayed at home indifferently for the whole day. At the same time, Fu Yuan also came over to give Jianghai a call, telling him that they would leave tomorrow morning. Today he couldn't move. These people didn't have Jianghai's physical fitness. Today these people's bodies were weak and sore. However, some people still had to go to work. They still had to do what they needed to do. Whether or not it would affect them, he didn't know. On the contrary, Jianghai was still lively. After staying at home for a day, Jianghai and Qili drove the BMW to Fu Yuan's house early the next morning. Hey, you are here. You drank so much the day before yesterday. Did you feel uncomfortable? After a long phone call, Fu Yuan walked out of the house. When he saw Jianghai, he specially greeted him. It's okay. I often drink in the United States, so it's okay. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jianghai also found an excuse for himself and said with a smile. Fu Yuan had also been to Jianghai's house, so naturally, he knew that there were many drunkards in Jianghai's manor. Beer, vodka, brandy, tequila and so on were all mixed together. Perhaps Jianghai's resistance to alcohol was stronger. With a sigh, he also got into his car, stepped on the accelerator, and took Jianghai to the direction of Hailin City. Fu Yuan's hometown was also in Heilong Province, Peony River City. Hailin City was a county-level city under Peony River City. You could say that it was a district or a city. It was like there was a city in Bing City. Administratively, it was a district, but in fact, it was a city. There were many cities like this in Wuxia. It was less than 300 kilometers away from Bing City, so it was not very troublesome to drive there. Other than the time needed to exit the city and enter the highway, if the highway was not congested, it would take about 3 hours to get there. They set off at 8 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, it was time to have dinner. The whole 3 provinces in the northeast were mostly plains. Songnan Plains, there were no mountains in the northeast. The biggest mountain was the Changbai Mountains, but that was only in Jimimo Province and Liaoning Province. There were no mountains in Heilong Province. The hills around Bing City were a few hundred meters high. It was considered a good mountain, but it could not be compared to those famous mountains in the south. The only good thing about Bing City was that there were highways and bullet trains. Because the roads were very straight, it could run very fast. Although there were no mountains in Heilong Province, there were 2 ridges, De Anling and Shao Anling. De Anling was too big, and to be honest, it was really deserted. Shao Anling was better, but this had nothing to do with the place Jianghai was going to today. Hailin had many names, but the most famous one should be Hailin Snowfield. That's right. That's right. The sitting mountain eagle happened here. Of course, no one knew if it really happened or not. But to be honest, there were a lot of low mountains here. The land here was 9 mountains, half water and half land. It was indeed in the 3 provinces in the northeast. It was not a good place for farming. But because there were a lot of mountains, there were a lot of things produced here. There were all kinds of mountain products, paddles, dried fruits and medicinal herbs. These were all specialties of this city. When they got off the highway, Jianghai saw a lot of people on both sides of the road into the city. They were selling paddles. Among these paddles, most of them were kusanagi. Jianghai also liked to eat kusanagi. But to be honest, the kusanagi in Bing City, there were 2 types of kusanagi in Heilong Province. One was kusanagi in a greenhouse. Looked good, but it tasted bad. The second type was kusanagi, which was wild kusanagi. The taste was not bad. It was sour and sweet, but it was not sold well. If one did not order one, the kusanagi in Bing City would be much better than the kusanagi in other places. The kusanagi in the 3 northeast provinces was the best in Dandong City, followed by Lu Province, Sichuan Province, etc. The kusanagi in these places were also very delicious. But the kusanagi in these places was not included in the Heilong Province. Although the kusanagi in Heilong Province was not good, another type of kusanagi, blue kusanagi, was the best in Heilong Province. Even if other cities also planted blue kusanagi, the taste was not as good. But speaking of Hailin, there were 2 most famous specialties in Hailin. One was pine seeds and the other was ginseng. Hailin was one of the most important pine seed producing areas in Heilong Province. It was also one of the first cities in China to transplant ginseng. Although this city was not big, it had a lot of resources. Every day, people from all over the country would come here to buy pine seeds and ginseng. It was very lively. Fu Yuan's classmate lived in the mountains near this city. This wasn't the first time Fu Yuan had come here. Naturally, he wasn't polite and went directly to his classmate's house. When Jiang Hai arrived, his classmate and his classmate's wife had already prepared a very special local dish for them to eat. After introducing each other and getting to know each other, they did not stand on ceremony and started to eat directly. Although Jiang Hai drove a BMW, Jiang Hai's own casual temperament made it easy for him to make friends. After a while, they were very familiar with each other. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the group went to the back of the mountain. Jiang Hai came this time to buy some pine seeds to eat, and also to see if he could get some red pine seeds to plant. But after inquiring about it, he learned that this was not an easy thing to do. Nowadays, pine trees are sold as saplings. Currently, the red pine seeds are used for eating. They are big and have a high oil content, but there is no way to plant them. Unlike willow trees, pine trees have a poor regenerative ability. There was an old saying that went, "When there is wind, you will huff. When there is no wind, you will huff. When there is no wind, you will huff." It referred to the pine tree. As long as it was cut, no matter if it was a branch or something else, it would be useless. It would not survive. Therefore, transplanting pine trees was a very troublesome thing. However, Jiang Hai still wanted to give it a try. He made some raw pine cones. These were just picked from the tree. The scales have not yet opened. Only this kind of cones can be planted. After Jiang Hai brings them back to the United States, he can dry them in the sun. After those plump seeds are exposed to the sun, he can plant them. After looking at the pine seeds, Jiang Hai went down to look at the ginseng, which was the so-called ginseng in the forest. He was also interested in this. Chapter 1048. Ginseng was a perennial herb. There was no need to introduce it further. It could be found in any encyclopedia. Basically, there were 2 kinds of ginseng. One was the familiar ginseng and the other was the American ginseng. One lived in the Northeast, Korea, and the Far East of Soviet Russia, while the other lived in the United States and Canada. In terms of efficacy, the ginseng in Asia was naturally better, but the price in the United States was cheaper. Most importantly, the ginseng in the United States was basically wild. No one would plant it there. Ginseng was a medicinal material in Chinese medicine, but in Western medicine, it was a tree root. The people in the United States did not believe in it. Therefore, there were basically 3 kinds of ginseng in the market. The ginseng in the East was mainly the Changbai Mountain ginseng, the Korean ginseng, and the American ginseng. It was also called the American ginseng. It was mainly because during the last years of the Qing dynasty and the previous dynasty, the people distinguished the foreigners according to the appearance of the national flag. The American flag was gaudy. Together with the Citibank, it was called the American ginseng. Although the Heilong province was not close to the Changbai Mountain, there were many ginseng in the Danling and Xianling areas. Its efficacy was naturally good. In recent years there were naturally no more wild ginseng, but there were more and more farm ginseng. There were many kinds of farm ginseng. The one with the worst efficacy was the garden ginseng. It was white and fat. It was raised according to the method of growing radishes. Its nutrition was not much different from radishes. It was 2 to 3 yuan per gram. It was thicker than the other. It was also the most common type of ginseng in the market. The ginseng in the gift boxes was this kind of ginseng. This kind of ginseng needed to be grown for 3 to 6 years. The better one was called the striped ginseng. It needed to be transplanted twice. It was first raised in the garden until it was almost able to survive in the wild. Then, it was moved to the fields and the mountains. Its advantage was that its nutrition was better than radishes. Its disadvantage was that it was a little wild. Generally speaking, this kind of ginseng needed to be raised for more than 6 to 8 years. The price in the market was about 100 yuan per plant. The specific price was not available. It depended on the integrity of the merchants. The last type of ginseng was also the best cultivated one. It was the stone pillar ginseng, also known as the forest ginseng. This type of ginseng was directly selected from the wild ginseng. Then, it was planted under a big tree on the mountain to simulate the situation in the wild. At most, they would only remove the weeds. They would definitely not use fertilizers or medicines. They had very strict control over the soil and climate. This thing grew very slowly because there were many things in the natural world that were competing with it for nutrients. Basically, it would take at least 15 years for it to mature. Those that could be sold on the market would take 15 to 20 years. With such a long time, the price would naturally be extremely expensive. This kind of ginseng, after being cultivated, would at most be 30 grams, while the garden ginseng could grow to 300 grams. This was the difference. However, the price wasn't just 10 times that of the garden ginseng. It could be 20 or 30 times that of the garden ginseng. It mainly depended on the efficacy. Jiang Hai was interested in the forest ginseng. He was only interested in the best, but unfortunately, it was the same as the red pine tree. The seedlings of the forest ginseng were basically cultivated. There were seeds, but after buying them, it was unknown whether they could survive. Therefore, most people bought the seedlings of ginseng. However, it was not reliable for others to buy the seeds, but Jiang Hai didn't care. Therefore, after walking around, he bought a lot of ginseng seeds, which were the small red fruits of the ginseng. Of course, these seeds weren't really wild ginseng. They were all artificially cultivated. However, even so, the price of this thing wasn't cheap. After walking around here, Jiang Hai bought 100 pounds of pine seeds. Fu Yuan's classmates gave him 50 pine trees. He also bought 300 ginseng seeds. It could be said that he was returning home with a full harvest. In the evening, Fu Yuan's classmates were originally going to treat them to a meal of forest frogs, but Jiang Hai and the others had already left. After all, they had to drive 3 hours back, so they didn't eat. However, Fu Yuan's classmates brought them a lot of forest frogs. Of course, although they were called forest frogs, they weren't wild. These frogs were also called snow toads, but Jiang Hai preferred to call them hammering frogs. These frogs were used as offerings in the Ming and Qing dynasties, so they were technically called northeastern forest frogs. The taste was quite good. When Jiang Hai was young, his father often bought this thing to eat. It wasn't expensive, only a few yuan per gene. After buying it, Jiang Hai could play with it for several days. But these days, when he played with it to death, he directly cleaned it up and fried it to eat. This thing was delicious when cooked well. Generally, it was also delicious when fried, just like fried birds. It was estimated that everyone had played with it when they were young. Basically, in their parents' generation, there were very few people who had not played with birds or had not played with birds. After all, in the past, sparrows were not protected animals. They were one of the 4 pests. At that time, the country ordered people to eat sparrows. But in comparison, hammering frogs were more delicious than birds. But later they became fewer and fewer. There was even a period of time when they were listed as a protected animal. But after a few years they were lifted because they were too easy to raise. You can raise them in any pond. A pair of frogs can produce hundreds of them at once. They will grow into frogs in 2 months. A few months later they can be sold on the market. It is really easy to raise them. You can have as many as you want in 2 years. But Jiang Hai hadn't eaten this thing for a while. This time he brought it back to study. After settling all the matters here, Jiang Hai and his friends drove back to Bing City. That night, Jiang Hai ate fried hammering frogs. It was prepared by Chia. Although Chia was a young girl, she was very professional. No matter what it was, as long as it was an ingredient, she dares to cook it. Other young girls were afraid of snakes, mice and frogs. But Chia was not afraid of them. When she was still alive, she would use scissors to cut off the heads of the frogs. She would cut open the intestines and remove the internal organs. Occasionally, when there were females, she would leave the oil and seeds behind. This game should be like selling crabs. There would be more males than females. The oil and seeds of the snow clam were much more expensive than the hammering frogs. Chia fried this thing 3 times. It was very crispy. When Jiang Hai ate it at night, he didn't even need to spit out the bones. He just needed to dip it in the spice salt. It was crispy and delicious. There was no smell of soil. To be honest, frogs were called frogs. But frogs tasted better than chicken. Fu Yuan's classmate had brought him some frogs, and he finished them in a short time. Moreover, this thing might have some supplements. At night, Jiang Hai felt that he was much more vigorous. Just like this, an ordinary day passed. In the following days, Jiang Hai's life in Bing City was almost the same as when he was in the manor. Every morning when he woke up, he didn't want to show off in front of his mother-in-law. So, every morning after breakfast he would go back to his room to rest for a while or go out with his friends. But now was not the time to go to school. Everyone had work and things to do. Their free time was at night. However, Jiang Hai didn't like to go out at night. So, he was very bored during the day. Luckily, he could endure the loneliness and play computer or mobile games in his room. He played happily. Recently, he was addicted to a game called On Myoji. It was hard to understand why a Japanese game was made by Wuxia's game company. It was not even imported, but it was done well. Jiang Hai was addicted to this game. He spent some money on it, but he didn't get anything good. However, it wasn't a bad thing because there were Ibaraki, Shutten, Ubuteri, Ichimu and other spirits. Everyone had other two-faced Buddhas so they could ignore them. This lineup, coupled with the support of mountain hare, goldfish and other spirits, was not bad. He wasn't a European, but he wasn't an African either. Thinking about it, there was no problem. His nationality was Wuxia, and his territory was in the United States. As for the night, it was Qili and Du Ning's home ground. Of course, it wasn't that the other girls didn't encounter them at all. Although Jiang Hai said that he wouldn't be affected by Qili's suppression, he still had time to find some time. Regarding this, Qili just turned a blind eye. Just like that, more than half a month passed unknowingly. Soon it was the middle of May. Qi Yuanlong's family's matter had basically been resolved. Qi Jingtao had gone in. Qi Yuanlong had found countless connections to get a reprieve so that he could think of a way. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai and Qili wouldn't give him such a chance. Qi Jingtao was sentenced to 10 years for attempted murder. Of course, there were other crimes, but that had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Zhao Chen also went in and was directly sentenced to 15 years. After all, this guy had too much dirt on him. However, as Jiang Hai said, he had taken the initiative to go in. Jiang Hai wouldn't kill him. In these 15 years he would almost come out with Qi Jingtao. But whether Qi Jingtao could come out or not, no one knew. After the dust settled here, Qili found Qi Yuanlong through LVC. After explaining to him, he also accepted 0.5% of Qili's shares. He knew that this was for his retirement, and he didn't have the mood to do anything else. At this point, the Qi family's matter had officially come to an end. When the Qi family's matter was officially resolved, Jiang Hai's mother-in-law's heart problem was basically cured. As long as she ate Jiang Hai's beef and fish, it wouldn't be a big problem. After all the matters in Bing City were resolved, Qili had to leave. Chapter 1049. Hoo 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 woo ha ha. After a burst of rapid breathing, Qili's body couldn't help but tremble, and then she leaned weakly on Jiang Hai's chest with a calm face. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but pat her butt. Okay, go to sleep. Glancing at his watch, it was already more than 3 o'clock in the morning. Jiang Hai couldn't help but say to her. However, Qili shook her head and sat up again, moving slowly while looking at Jiang Hai. No, I'm leaving tomorrow. God knows when I'll see you next time. If I don't sleep tonight, you won't sleep either. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qili said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also shook his head weakly. But your body can't bear it. Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai said helplessly. You will have a way, won't you? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili said with a smile and then moved again. As for Du Ning next to her, he had already gone to sleep. Looking at Qili's crazy appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Why is she doing this? It's as if I'm going to the battlefield. If she wants, she can come to me at any time. It's not that he doesn't have a plane now. He can come once a week for the weekend. However, Qili shook her head and refused this proposal. Unconsciously, she was further squeezing Jiang Hai, because Qili was very afraid. She was afraid that if she could really go once a month or even once a week like Jiang Hai said, she would be reluctant to leave. The Qi family could not do without her yet. She had to be on her last shift. As long as she could find a suitable successor, everything would be done. In the future, she would have her phone to control the Qi family every day to ensure the survival of the Qi family. However, she had to find a trustworthy person who could carry out her orders 120% of the time. So before that, she could only be crazy for a while, and Jiang Hai had no way to resist. He could only surrender. Then let's do it. That night, Jiang Hai and Qili didn't sleep. The sound that could make people's blood boil lasted for a whole night. The next morning, Qili and Du Ning left. Jiang Hai drove them to the airport. His private plane would take them to the capital and then come back. Tomorrow Jiang Hai and the others would leave. Today Jiang Hai would send the old lady back to the ancestral home of the Qi family. As for Qijie and Qiya, they also found an excuse to go back to the United States, so they would leave with Jiang Hai and the others. Just like that, another ordinary day passed. After Qiya repeatedly warned Jing Xiua not to mess up again, Jiang Hai and the others also got on his plane and went to Boston. However, as soon as the plane took off, everyone unfastened their seat belts. On the other side, Qijie and Qiya pushed Jiang Hai down and pulled him into the back room. What a joke. These days, watching Jiang Hai and Qili live together, they had been suffocating. Now that they were in a private space, what else could they say? How could they not take the opportunity to make up for the time? Although Azalina and Wallace Shelley were also suffocating these days, they were fine now. After Jiang Hai sent Qijie, Qiya, his mother-in-law, and Jing Xiua back to the Qi family's mansion yesterday, he went back to his own villa. That night naturally belonged to Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Although the two did not stay up all night, they did not go to bed until 2 o'clock in the morning, so they did not really want to go to bed now. Therefore they would not disturb Qijie and Qiya now. In this way Jiang Hai did not have much rest on the plane. For 3 days in a row, Jiang Hai's sleep time was probably only about 5 hours. After landing he did not sleep much. After returning home it was even more lively. There were many people who missed Jiang Hai. After all this time Jiang Hai had been away for nearly a month. He left at the end of April and it was already the end of May when he came back. The smell of summer was getting closer and closer in this city. Some fashionable girls had begun to show their winter results. No matter if they were fat or thin, at least they were white enough. The temperature in Winthrop was quite high at this time. At this time in Bing City, people were wearing short-sleeved shirts, skirts and so on. Although Boston was not as hot as Bing City, it was not too cold either. The highest temperature every day was about 22 degrees Celsius. Sometimes it was 24 degrees Celsius, and sometimes it was 21 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Celsius. At night the temperature difference was not big. It was about 13 degrees Celsius. So now the standard in Boston was a short-sleeved shirt and a pair of trousers. If one was afraid of the cold they could add a thin jacket. Although Winthrop was also in Boston, it was close to the sea. When the breeze blew it was still a little cold, but that was referring to the outside. It was very warm at home. Before Jiang Hai came back, Aphrodite and the others who stayed here were dressed more seriously. But on the second day after Jiang Hai came back they all changed. Of course, under the command of Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunxian, they changed into the clothes that Jiang Hai usually wore at home, mainly in winter and summer. A thin, almost translucent camisole, or a shirt of Jiang Hai's size. Although he almost never wore a shirt, he deliberately only buttoned it in the middle so that the top and bottom could be seen clearly. The jerseys that Jiang Hai bought to play basketball were also their favorite. Especially those who were more petite, they especially liked to wear them. The sleeves could directly reveal half of their balls, but they didn't care. It could be said that their goal was to let Jiang Hai see them. This was only talking about the top, the bottom completely disappeared. When they got on the sofa they must have M-shaped legs so that Jiang Hai could see them clearly. Or when they saw Jiang Hai sitting there watching TV or something, they directly put their legs on Jiang Hai's legs, or let Jiang Hai rest his head on their legs. These girls were very good at these little tricks. The only difference was Delina, Marian, and Tarrag. These 3 girls were under Jiang Hai's strict control. Even if it was hot they had to wear pajamas. Moreover they had to wear opaque pajamas. It was impossible for their lower body to disappear. The 3 girls were quite speechless. After fooling around at home for a few days, Jiang Hai also couldn't stand it anymore, so he took the initiative to go outside and stay on the lounge chair. These girls were very clear that Jiang Hai was very possessive. They wore nothing at home and it didn't matter how they acted coquettishly with Jiang Hai. However, in front of outsiders they had to wrap themselves up tightly. Except for the arms, legs, neck and face they couldn't expose other places. Otherwise Jiang Hai would be jealous. They were only sexy for Jiang Hai. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai didn't stop them, because they knew when to advance and when to retreat, which was a very good point. Of course, after Jiang Hai came back, it was impossible for him to fool around with his girls at home all day long. He still had his own things to do, such as inspecting the pastures, fishing grounds, and checking accounts during the day. It had to be said that Dulles Gerard had also negotiated the contract. Every year, Jiang Hai would provide Balian Mudun with 40% of the red wine produced by his manor. They wouldn't enter Europe and the Middle East, and the price would increase by 21%. This had also been discussed with Prawalton. The price of red wine in the United States was also increasing, but it was not as horrible as 21%. It only increased by 15%. The original price of a bottle was $800, but now it was $920, and it was limited in each supermarket. Prawalton didn't have any opinions about this, because this red wine didn't sell particularly well in the first place. It didn't matter if it was more expensive or less, but in the future she would know that this idea would cause her to lose a lot of income. But now it seemed to be harmless. After Jiang Hai came back, the first batch of red wine had been sent to Europe. How Balian Madan operated there had nothing to do with Jiang Hai, but if his selling price was particularly high, then Jiang Hai would also increase the price next year. He was not a fool. Jiang Hai could still inquire about how much he was selling. The only thing that had some problems was the red wine side. The other industries really didn't have any problems. Now the cowboys were just herding cattle. Every week, people from the Walmart Group and the Sea Merchant Supermarket would come over to pick up the grown cattle and transport them to the slaughterhouse. After killing them, they would put them on ice. They were not frozen, and they would be sent directly to the Boston airport. Zheng Jin would send these beef to the major cities in the United States, and some other second-tier cities would be transported by local trucks. At the same time, there were planes that flew to Europe, but they basically only went to the few major cities in Europe such as London, Paris, Rome, Berlin, and so on. They were basically the capitals of various countries, even Moscow was not included. Flights to the fish farm were more frequent. Because fish and beef were different, they basically had to fly once a day. Of course, unlike beef, which was a national flight, they had to fly to the southern part of the United States on Monday, the central part of the United States on Tuesday, the northern part of the United States on Wednesday, and Europe and the international part of the United States on Thursday, which was Wuxia and Japan. Then there was a cycle. However, Europe, Wuxia, and Japan only flew once a week. After all, the demand was not particularly high, and of course the ration was not particularly large. Now that these things were on the right track, it didn't matter whether Jiang Hai was keeping an eye on them or not. As long as he was keeping an eye on the accounts, it was fine. So after pretending to be busy for a few days, Jiang Hai returned to the time when he was resting. But then again, he really liked resting. Chapter 1050. When a person was bored and his life was monotonous, time would pass very quickly. There was a term for this, it was called swaying. When he was in school, he would feel that time was passing so slowly. A class lasted for 40 minutes, it was almost like a year. But when he entered society, he would feel that time was passing so quickly. He hadn't done anything yet, but the day had already passed. Especially for those who were busy with work and those who had nothing better to do. For example, Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was really idle. He didn't have anything to do. He was in control of the core power of his manner, and that was enough for him. The rest of the time was enough for him to enjoy life. Every day, in addition to sowing the seeds of life for his sisters, he had nothing serious to do. As the temperature rose, he would brew a pot of tea every day, sit under a big tree, play with his mobile phone, enjoy the breeze, drink the tea, and wait for lunch, dinner, and then the day would pass. The most terrible thing was swaying. Just like this, in a flash, Jiang Hai had returned to Winthrop for half a month. Today was the middle of June. On a Saturday, Jiang Hai was lying on his recliner as usual. The temperature rose very quickly in summer, but Jiang Hai was still very calm because it was very cool in his manner. Jiang eat watermelon. At this moment, a series of messy footsteps sounded. Then Jiang Hai saw Delina, Marian, and Taraga running towards him with a plate of cut watermelon in their hands. Slow down, slow down. Don't be afraid of falling, my watermelon. Looking at the three girls running over, Jiang Hai also sat up. Looking at them, he couldn't help but shake his head and said with a distressed face. Jiang Hai grew a lot of fruits in his manor. He liked to eat fruits very much. In addition to the greenhouse, it could be said that fresh fruits were constantly available all year round. There were all kinds of berries, blueberries, strawberries, cranberries, cherries, watermelons, currants, apples, oranges, peaches, plums, kiwis, pomegranates, and so on. In January they could eat currants, which were the frozen currants in China. In February they could eat kiwis, pomegranates, etc. In March they should be called pineapples. Unfortunately, they didn't grow in Jiang Hai's manor, but they could be bought ready-made. In April they could buy mangoes and mangosteens to eat. In May they could eat currants and lychees, cherries in June, peaches and plums in July, watermelons in August, grapes in September, pears in October, apples in November, and oranges in December. All year round, Jiang Hai would have plenty of food in his manor. Of course, the above mention was only the time when the fruits were abundant. There would always be a difference between early and late ripening. For example, many watermelons were already ripe in June. Naturally, there would be more ripe in August. Jiang Hai only planted 1 mu of watermelons. There were about 300 seedlings, but they were quite big. In Jiang Hai's territory, there was no problem of insufficient nutrition. Therefore, each seedling could bear a bunch of watermelons. Moreover, they were very big and very sweet. Last year, many watermelons were too sweet and directly exploded because they were too sweet. This wasn't because of any injections. It was purely because of excessive nutrition. Jiang Hai's watermelons, the watermelons near the rind, were even sweeter than the watermelons sold in the United States. If such a watermelon was sold, it could be imagined that it would be popular. However, Jiang Hai didn't care too much about this business. Currently, the most expensive watermelon in the world was the black-skinned watermelon from Sichuan County, Japan. The bigger watermelons that could be bought in the supermarket were basically sold for about $300. This was already a well-deserved overlord price in the watermelon industry. However, how much did Jiang Hai sell a pound of beef? Wasn't it? Therefore, he didn't care about this small amount of money. Not to mention, although his watermelons tasted good, they were very ordinary. 1 mu of land could produce about 1,000 watermelons. The average watermelon was between 4 and 6 pounds. They might not even have enough to eat, let alone sell them. Don't worry, I have grown up now. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Deliana, who was holding the watermelon, couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. She put the watermelon on the small table next to Jiang Hai's teacup, then she took a piece and ate it. The watermelon seeds were directly spat out into the grass in the distance, and the watermelon rind was also thrown there. This thing was very nutritious. Jiang Hai's chickens liked to eat this, so it wouldn't be a waste to throw it there. Okay. Hearing Deliana's words, Jiang Hai smiled and shook his head. When he first adopted this pair of twins, they were only 14 years old, but they were thin and small, just like 11 or 12 years old. Their bodies were almost completely undeveloped. Because they couldn't speak, they were quite vigilant and timid when they looked at others. But now, after raising them for 3 years, the situation of the 2 little girls was completely different. Their throats had been cured, and coupled with rich nutrition and abundant aura, their congenital deficiencies were forcibly made up for. Now the 2 girls were about 1.72 meters tall. They were quite tall, had white and beautiful skin, and long blonde hair draped behind their heads. They looked very capable. Their bodies had slender muscle lines and even had waistlines. Their thighs were straight and somewhat firm, but they were still very thin. Chijia and Azalina were experts in health and training. They had done a lot of research on how to shape a woman's perfect body. Therefore, looking at their bodies, Delina and Marion would have no problem going to Victoria's Secret. As for their appearance, it was unknown if it was because Jiang Hai wanted them to look like this, but their appearance was different from traditional Americans. Their skin was very delicate, they had big eyes, small noses and thin lips. If one were to say they looked like a movie star, Jessica Alba, but she had blonde hair and her skin was whiter than her. Even Selena Gomez had asked Jiang Hai more than once if he wanted to let the twins debut. She was sure that if the twins debuted, they would inevitably cause a storm. However, the twins only liked to stay with Jiang Hai. They didn't go anywhere except here. Although Jiang Hai vaguely felt that the twins' feelings for him were not only gratitude, but also the feelings of a daughter to a father, but Jiang Hai didn't say anything about it. They were still young, and when they grew up, they would discover the nature of a scumbag. Well, no one would call him a scumbag anymore. Jiang Hai sat up, picked up a piece of watermelon and ate it. No matter how many times he ate his watermelon, he still felt that it was delicious. 4 people and half a watermelon were finished in a short time. After Jiang Hai took out a tissue next to him and wiped it, he was about to lie down again, but before he could lie down, the 3 girls gathered around him. Jiang Hai, take us out to play tomorrow? Lying beside Jiang Hai, Marion blinked her big eyes and asked Jiang Hai, go out to play? You can go by yourself. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at them with some doubts. What kind of path is this? No, you must take us out to play. Tomorrow is Children's Day. Parents must take us out to play. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana said with a smile. Although they have never regarded Jiang Hai as their father, after all, Jiang Hai is their guardian by law, and the same is true for Taraga. Don't talk to me about those useless things. Children's Day is June 1st. It has long passed and there is no Children's Day in the United States. Do you think it's my first day in the United States? Jiang Hai said indifferently after giving them a blank look. Indeed, it's not that Jiang Hai has never celebrated Children's Day. June 1st Children's Day is an international convention, but no one in the United States celebrates June 1st Children's Day. Well, to be exact, except for Wuxia, basically no country in the world celebrates June 1st Children's Day, because it was originally a very sad holiday. The origin of this holiday was in June 1942, when Germany attacked Czech Republic and massacred a village called Lidice. All the men and babies over the age of 16 were killed, and only the women and 90 children survived and were sent to concentration camps. Later they won. In order to mourn this village and the world's dear who died in World War II, in November 1949, the International Democratic Women's Federation decided that June 1st would be International Children's Day. Therefore, almost no country in the world celebrates June 1st Children's Day, because it is a very sad day. Therefore, if you celebrate June 1st Children's Day abroad, it will be like September 18th in China, or some special commemorative days in Nandu. When the whole country is in mourning, if you go out to play firecrackers and celebrate, aren't you looking for a beating? Therefore, in foreign countries, no one celebrates June 1st Children's Day. When Jiang Hai first came, he was a little confused, but now he understands. TCH, who said June 1st Children's Day? We are talking about the second Sunday in June. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga also patted Jiang Hai's leg and said somewhat reproachfully, Taraga is already on summer vacation. After a year of study, she can only say that it is passable. After all, she has only been exposed to formal learning for a year. There are more than 200 first-year students in the whole school, and she ranks in the 140th place. This is also under the condition that she handed in a blank paper for history. This is quite good. The history of Native Americans and Americans. She didn't set the classroom on fire, which is already giving face to Jiang Hai. The sixth Sunday? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then rolled his eyes and thought about it. There seems to be such a holiday. The origin of this holiday is quite famous in the United States. Chapter 1051. Speaking of Children's Day in the United States, there is a story. Although the whole world, except for Wuxia, doesn't celebrate Children's Day on June 1st, each country has its own Children's Day. For example, in Japan, May 5th is Boys' Day and March 3rd is Girls' Day. Watching some anime, parents often put dolls for the girls at home. South Korea's Children's Day is also May 5th, Canada's is August 15th, Thailand's is the second Saturday of January, Turkey's is April 23rd, Germany's is September 20th, Singapore's is October 1st, the United Kingdom's is July 14th, Spain's is January 5th, India's is November 14th, Switzerland's is November 23rd, Mexico's is April 30th, Peru's is April 28th, Hungary's is the last Sunday of May, etc. Because every country has a Children's Day but the United States doesn't. In fact, it can't be said that it doesn't exist because the laws of each state are different, so Children's Day is not on the same day in each state. In 2000, a 4-year-old girl wrote a letter to the then-President Clinton, who was involved in the Monica Lewinsky scandal, saying that she hoped to have a National Children's Day. Clinton set October 8th as the National Children's Day in the United States, but later, when George W. Bush came to power, he overturned this point. However, George W. Bush also decided to give children a holiday, so he changed it to June. June 3rd is the National Children's Day, but later, Americans felt that it was too undemocratic to set a date for the holiday. Look at the holidays in the United States, none of them have a fixed date. Christmas and New Year's Day are not counted, they must have a fixed date. In addition to these holidays from Europe, those unique to the United States, such as Thanksgiving Day, have no fixed date. Thanksgiving Day, Labor Day, etc., all of them have no fixed date. Basically, it is a Sunday in a certain month or some other time, and it is basically different every year. It is very free. The same is true for children. Currently, Children's Day in the United States is the second Sunday in June, but Jiang Hai really didn't pay attention to it. Because no one asked him to take them to celebrate Children's Day before. Besides, are they children? Looking at the 3 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and asked with some doubts, "Are you children?" "Why not? We're not even 18 yet." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana straightened her chest as she watched Jiang Hai seriously. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai revealed a bitter smile. 17 years old is still a child? Looking at the 3 girls beside him, Jiang Hai shook his head and asked, "Of course we're still girls. Why don't you help us break that thing? If it breaks, we won't be able to pass." Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian giggled and sat on Jiang Hai's lap. As she spoke, she wiped the corner of her clothes. All right. I'm afraid of you. If you want to go out and play, just say it. Tell me, where do you want to go tomorrow? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai waved his hand directly. Are you kidding me? He has persisted for more than 1,000 chapters. There is no need to lose his integrity at this time. Looking at the three girls in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Okay, we have already thought about it. We are going to the amusement park tomorrow, we are going to the cinema, we are going diving, we are going to ride a motorboat, and… Hearing Jiang Hai directly reject their proposal, the three girls couldn't help but pout, but they recovered in the next second. Then they told Jiang Hai where they were going tomorrow. Stop, you think too much. We don't have that much time. We can go motorboat and diving at any time. It doesn't matter. Let's go to the amusement park and watch a movie tomorrow. Hearing the words of the three, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said, although the coral reefs in Jiang Hai's fishing ground are not as beautiful as the coral reefs in Australia, but in recent years, with Jiang Hai's intention to help expand the coral reefs, and at the same time he brought back colorful corals from the south several times. Now his coral reefs are not as bare and gray as they were a few years ago, and there are some colorful corals. Purple, red, yellow, pink, blue, there are all kinds of colors. If the weather is good, it is quite good to go down and look. Usually, Jiang Hai likes to play there when he goes to the sea to catch seafood. Qi Jie and the others have also gone diving, but for these girls, because Jiang Hai is concerned about their safety, he did not let them dive. So they have only seen the photos taken by Qi Jie and the others. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that they were still young, but now it seems that they have grown up unknowingly. It is time to let them dive, of course, with his accompaniment. Okay. Hearing that Jiang Hai agreed, the three girls also laughed, then quickly ran back to the villa, leaving Jiang Hai to lie there and continue to play games, but after being teased by Marian just now, he seems to be a little impulsive. Sitting up, he glanced around and just saw Jialina, carrying a bucket of fresh milk and walking to the villa. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. After sitting up from the recliner, he quickly walked to her side. Let's go. Walking to Jialina's side, Jiang Hai took her hand and walked to the shadow behind the house. Hey, there is still milk. Seeing Jiang Hai pulling her away, Jialina couldn't help but say in a panic. It's okay, I will give you fresh milk. Hearing Jialina's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile in front of her. Hearing what he said, Jialina's face couldn't help but blush. They were an old couple. How could she not understand what Jiang Hai meant? She rolled her eyes at him, but she didn't stop him. After putting the milk bucket on a flat position, she was pulled into the corner by Jiang Hai. Not long after, in the corner, there was the sound of water, followed by heavy breathing. From the shadow of the sun, it could be seen that a person put one leg on the shoulder of another person, and the other leg stood on the ground, forming a split. As for what they were doing, no one knew. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai set off for Boston with Delina, Marian, and Taraga. Because it was now the middle of June, the temperature outside was also rising rapidly. The hottest time of the day was even 26 or 27 degrees. Naturally, including Jiang Hai, the other girls also changed into summer clothes. Since being guided by Selena Gomez last time, Taraga now also had some interest in makeup, clothing, and the like. Usually he would also read fashion magazines and talk to Selena Gomez on the phone. Now Delina and Marian were dressed according to Taraga's style. Because they were going to the amusement park today, it was important for them to dress casually. The three girls weren't short, so they could say goodbye to high heels. They were all wearing the kind of sneakers that exposed their long legs, but their clothes were different. Tarag was wearing a shirt that was a little tight, as if she had deliberately worn it a size smaller. It perfectly displayed the two things that could not be described, which were not small to begin with. Her stomach was also short, and one could see a very healthy Apollo's belt. She was wearing a pair of hot pants. According to her, the pants were cool to wear. Delina was wearing a very loose t-shirt, half of her shoulder could be seen when she pulled it to the side. A rope was tied around her waist as a belt, which not only didn't make her look bloated, but also showed the advantages of her thin waist and long legs. She was wearing a pair of jeans, which also showed her long legs. What Marian was wearing was probably the most normal, but it was also the most abnormal. She was wearing a school uniform, but that school uniform, it was a bit like the kind worn by Japanese girls. Sneakers, knee-high white socks, a white female school uniform with a standing collar, and a short skirt that reached her knees. When Jiang Hai saw her clothes, even an experienced driver like him couldn't stand it. Needless to say, she must have taken Feng Yunqian and Ai Xiaoxi's clothes. But she liked to wear it, and the clothes were not revealing, so Jiang Hai couldn't say anything. He just let her put on the leggings and then the four of them drove Jiang Hai's shield to Boston. Their target this time was Boston's Six Flags amusement park. Don't think that every city in the United States was a Disney. In fact, there were only 6 Disney parks in the world and only 2 in the United States. One Disneyland is in California, and one is in Orlando, which is Florida. Other than Disneyland, there is only one Disneyland in Japan, one Disneyland in Paris, and one Disneyland in Hong Kong and Shanghai. There are only 6 Disneyland in Japan. In the United States, there were more than 50 Disney parks just like Happy Valley and Wuxia. Although this amusement park was weaker than Disney, its strength was still very good. It claimed to have the best roller coaster in the world. The number of roller coasters in each park was quite large, and it was very popular among young people. Jiang Hai and the others wanted to go here this time. After driving for a while, Jiang Hai arrived outside the amusement park. But to be honest, at this time, outside the amusement park, it could be described as a sea of people. This also proved to Jiang Hai that whether it was the children in Wuxia or the United States, there was no child who didn't like festivals. Chapter 1052. When Jiang Hai and the rest arrived at the amusement park, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth. What? Because there are too many people. At this time, outside the amusement park, there are gongs, drums, firecrackers, red flags, and a sea of people. The Americans do not play with gongs, drums, or firecrackers. Naturally, there are no red flags. But there is a sea of people. Countless parents brought their children to the amusement park to play. And the most important thing was that the United States didn't have a family planning policy. Therefore, American families generally had at least 2 children or even 3 or 4. Moreover, Americans often divorced and often reorganized 2 families, so there were a lot of children. Regarding this, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Now, there were more children than adults in front of the entrance of the amusement park, and there were quite a lot of them. Are we still going to play? Looking at those people, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask awkwardly. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to join in the fun. When he went out to play, he would never do it during the New Year because it would be very crowded. Anyway, he does not have a job and he can go out to play whenever he wants. When he saw so many people, he does not want to get off the bus. But Daliana and the rest do not care about this. I have booked the tickets. Let's go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian waved her mobile phone. She had booked 4 adult tickets. For places like this, the tickets include the cost of all the entertainment facilities. This amusement park is not like the amusement park in Bing City, where they still need to buy a set of tickets. Either you bring us out to play or you bring us to get a room. You choose. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes. What was she thinking about at such a young age? Okay, I'll find a place to park. Raising his hand, Jiang Hai looked at the 3 guys full of desires and said helplessly. Then Jiang Hai walked around the area and finally found a parking space far away. After parking the car, he went to the amusement park with the 3 girls. At the ticket office at the entrance, Marian showed the text message and exchanged it for 4 tickets. Jiang Hai should have told them that mobile phones are not allowed to pay in most places in the US. It is the same here. But you can use your bank card to buy tickets online and exchange them later. The US is still acceptable. Look at France. In order to protect physical bookstores, French books are not allowed to be sold online. The price of books sold in bookstores is the same as the price of books sold online. In the US, Amazon and other bookstores are cheaper. Holding the tickets, a group of 4 people lined up in a long line and walked into the amusement park. When they came in from the outside, Jiang Hai didn't want to come in because he felt that there would be a lot of people. After entering, this feeling became even stronger. Throughout the amusement park, in front of all the facilities, there are a lot of people. Different genders and ages, the children's choices are also different. Some younger children are fond of the merry-go-round, while some more adventurous ones will go to various roller coasters, haunted houses, carts, and the like. Jiang Hai glanced at the amusement park here. It is similar to the amusement park in China. At most, it looked a little grand. Every project had a theme, and some scenes would be arranged for performances. However, the timing of the events was quite tight. As soon as they arrived in the amusement park, the 3 girls were like wild horses out of control. They began to discuss what to play, how to play, and when to play. As for Jiang Hai, his opinion is not important. He is pulled here and there by the 3 girls. They kept queuing up and playing. Fortunately, Jiang Hai is strong now, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Watching the performances and playing with the entertainment facilities. To be honest, Jiang Hai has a very fulfilling day. But the pace is a bit too fast. Basically, after waiting in line for a roller coaster before he can relax, he is directly taken to another place to watch a performance. Before the performance is over, he is pulled to another place to play in a haunted house. At noon they casually eat some hamburgers in the amusement park. After eating they continue to play. He has to admit that these three girls are really energetic. They played until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. After watching the last performance they gradually quieted down. I'm so tired, let's go back. Sitting on a bench in the park, Jiang Hai looked at the three girls in front of him who still want to play, and he couldn't help but say with some speechlessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the three girls shook their heads at the same time. How can we go back? Didn't we say that we are going to watch a movie? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the three girls said with a serious face, but then Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and looked at it, looking at them with some embarrassment. Watching a movie is fine, but there doesn't seem to be anything to watch. Handing the mobile phone to the three girls in front of him, Jiang Hai said with some helplessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the three girls also looked at it. To be honest, this year is a big year for Hollywood movies. There are many big productions such as Fast and Furious 8, Wolverine 3, King Kong, Skull Island, Justice League, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, Planet of the Apes 3, Avatar 2, Guardian of the Galaxy 2, Transformers 5, Pacific Rim 2, and so on. There are many good movies, but at this time, there are no movies. After a period of time, about 10 days or so, the summer vacation will be released. What's Stealing Daddy 2, Transformers 5, and so on will be released. And now, this time period is also the most awkward time. At present, in the cinema, Jiang Hai has only seen 3 movies: Terminator 6, Toy Story 4, and Star Wars 8. Terminator and Star Wars can be ignored. Because he has only seen the first 3 Terminator movies, and he has never seen Star Wars. Toy Story. That is for the kids, okay? And the most important thing is, isn't it said that the series will end when the 3rd movie is released? Woody and the others have already been sent away, what is there to act? So, the current Jiang Hai is really not interested in watching movies. Let's go, let's watch this. Seeing that Jiang Hai doesn't seem to want to go, Daliana and Marian also sat on his left and right side, constantly shaking his arm, attracting the attention of many people next to them. In fact, today there are a lot of people looking at these 3 girls. After all, the 3 girls are beautiful. If it weren't for the fact that it was basically one family at a time today, even if Jiang Hai was here, there would probably be people coming to talk to them. Of course, even if someone came to talk to them, Jiang Hai doesn't care because those guys can't take them away. Lego Batman? What the hell is this? Taking the mobile phone from Daliana's hand, Jiang Hai looked at the page where he had already bought 4 tickets for the last row. Besides screaming, he couldn't do anything else. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? But since the tickets have been bought, Jiang Hai has nothing to say. After leaving the amusement park with the 3 girls, Jiang Hai first took them to eat. Maybe because of Jiang Hai's influence, these 3 girls also like to eat teppanyaki. This meal was naturally very enjoyable and it also cost Jiang Hai a lot of money, but for Jiang Hai it doesn't matter. After dinner it was already very dark when they came out. The 4 of them went to a nearby cinema. After changing their tickets they bought drinks and popcorn, then walked into the cinema. It turns out that even if today is Children's Day, there are still very few people who would take their children to see Lego Batman at night. In the whole cinema, there are more than 100 seats in total, but there are only a dozen people in total. Jiang Hai and the others also have to be counted. Because there are really not many people, they didn't sit according to their seats. There are people sitting on the east side and the west side, but they weren't close to each other. Jiang Hai and the others sat in the middle of the last row. As the music sounded, the movie also started, but in Jiang Hai's opinion, this movie is really childish. The dialogue is very childish and the animation is very childish. How many adults would like to watch a cartoon made of Lego bricks? Among all the superheroes, this is Batman with a darker style, and not many people would like to watch it. But soon, Jiang Hai knew that these people actually didn't come to watch the movie. There was a young couple in the row next to Jiang Hai. 5 minutes after the start of the movie, they were already entangled together. The woman sat on the man's body and the 2 kept kissing. Their hands were also testing each other's body. Jiang Hai felt that this thing may be much better than the cartoon, so he sat there and watched their progress. But unconsciously, 3 small hands also touched Jiang Hai's indescribable place. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's hand was faster than them. With 3 slaps on their backs, the 3 little ones also pursed their lips and looked at Jiang Hai helplessly. You see, they are already like this. It's not good if we don't do this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Taraga came over and whispered, "Not good, my ass. They are all couples. I am your father. Sit down for me. Watch carefully or go home." Jiang Hai glanced at her. For Jiang Hai, this is the bottom line, and it is not so easy to break. Hearing Jiang Hai's resolute words, the three girls also sighed. It's so hard to meet such an unromantic guy. Chapter 1053. Why did you see those three little guys angry when you came back? What did you do to them? Lying on Jiang Hai's big bed, Feng Yunshan asked Jiang Hai doubtfully while swallowing something that can't be described. How is that possible? Those three little guys are a little tired. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai said with a little embarrassment. He can't say that the three little guys tempted him, but he didn't agree, so they were angry. That's too much, really? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but come over with a smile and gently bite Jiang Hai's chest, then blinked and asked him. For Ai Xiaoxi, living here in Jiang Hai is really satisfying. She doesn't need to worry about work and money here. She enjoys life every day and is very indifferent every day. She likes this kind of life very much. As for vanity, it's a very simple thing. She can show off in her circle of friends that she is sunbathing, diving, playing on Jiang Hai's yacht, riding a horse, shopping, and looking at the likes that she has harvested. There is nothing uncomfortable about it. The only bad thing is that it is too far away from her home. But it doesn't matter. She can go back every year. Otherwise, after graduation she will go to Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou to work. She can't earn even a fraction of her current expenses in a year. She can only go home once or twice a year. Now she is here with Jiang Hai. Everything is wonderful. The only thing that she couldn't accept at first was that there were too many women around Jiang Hai, but now she has gradually let it go. It's okay if there are too many. She will treat them as roommates. Anyway, Jiang Hai is very strong in that aspect, and there is no problem in being ignored. And Jiang Hai really likes her. This is the most important thing. Of course it's true. Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He can't say anything, right? By the way, Jiang, the ginseng and pine seeds you brought back have sprouted. At this moment, Jiang Hai's favorite Aphrodite wisely diverted the topic so that Jiang Hai wouldn't feel so awkward. After hearing this news, Jiang Hai couldn't help but twitch his brows. This is good news. Hearing Aphrodite's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said. This was indeed good news, but now wasn't the time to talk about these things. He hugged Aphrodite so that Jiang Hai could praise her. The next morning, Jiang Hai went to the place where he planted pine seeds and ginseng seeds. Pine seeds and ginseng seeds weren't easy to grow. In China, there was a special base to cultivate these things. It was troublesome for the average person to grow a lot of them, so very few people would directly buy seeds to plant. However, this problem didn't apply to Jiang Hai. On the second day after returning to Winthrop, Jiang Hai started to prepare to plant these two things. Those pine trees were all exposed to the sun. Only after the pine seeds were exposed to the sun could they be sown. However, they couldn't be directly thrown into the forest or grassland because the seeds didn't absorb enough nutrients and wouldn't germinate. Therefore, after they were exposed to the sun, they had to be planted in a greenhouse and wait for them to germinate before they could be transplanted. The same was true for ginseng seeds. They had to be grown like rice seedlings before they could be transplanted. Once again, it was proven that Jiang Hai's spiritual energy was very useful. The effect was very strong. Originally, he just wanted to give it a try, but he didn't expect that it would actually sprout. Looking at the small buds in front of him, Jiang Hai knew that it was time to transplant them. Although he might not take care of them very carefully, with Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, there naturally wouldn't be a problem. He took the small sprouts and shovels to plant the pine trees. He didn't plant them in the original forest, but in the open space in front of the door. Pine trees had pine needles all year round. In addition to producing pine seeds, they were also ornamental trees. Naturally, it was Jiang Hai's idea to plant them here. It could be used for ornamental purposes and also prevent others from seeing the situation in his house. Since Jiang Hai's manor became popular, there were more and more people around his house. Some of them were individuals who wanted to investigate Jiang Hai's secret. Some of them were major forces and officials who wanted to investigate Jiang Hai's secret. They all wanted to know why Jiang Hai's cows could grow to such an extent without any special care. Jiang Hai couldn't drive them away because these people didn't enter his territory. The road outside was public property. Jiang Hai had no right to drive these people away, but it didn't prevent him from planting some trees to block their view. Then he could also harvest some pine seeds every year, which was naturally an excellent thing. With a small shovel on his back, Jiang Hai dug a hole every 5 meters and threw the seeds that had sprouted into it. Then he watered some water mixed with his spiritual energy. After everything was done, Jiang Hai returned to his home. After taking the ginseng seeds again, he went to his forest. He didn't know whether it was because of the spiritual energy or because there were many terrifying creatures living here. When Jiang Hai first came to this manor, he often came to this forest to play. It was because this forest was very good at that time, especially in summer. When the weather was good, the sun would shine from the top of the trees to the ground. The spots were very special. Not only did Jiang Hai like it very much, but Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan also came here to take photos together. They liked this place very much. But he didn't know if it was because of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, but now these trees were growing bigger and denser. Sequoias, oaks, red maples, these trees were growing bigger and bigger. In the past they might only be a dozen meters tall, but now they were at least 20 meters tall. Moreover, they were quite luxuriant. The spots of sunlight in the past were very fairy tale-like, but now it was basically dark in the forest. You couldn't see any sunlight because the leaves had blocked it. However, during the day it was definitely brighter than at night. But if a stranger walked into this forest, it was inevitable that they would feel very scared. Don't forget, Jiang Hai still has 3 pets here: a mountain lion, a forest boa, and a crocodile. He didn't know what they looked like. Anyway, he came to plant ginseng today so he could take a look. The best way to plant ginseng was to plant it under a big tree. First, because it was hidden, there weren't many wild animals that would see it. Second, because the tree would block the sunlight. Ginseng wasn't a sun-loving plant, otherwise, its flowers would be valuable and not its roots. Jiang Hai's forest was naturally very suitable for the growth of ginseng. After injecting a little spiritual energy into these small ginseng seedlings, Jiang Hai also scattered them in this forest. After planting the ginseng, Jiang Hai also raised his head and walked into the forest. Along the way, Jiang Hai really found that this forest was really lively now. Although wild turkeys couldn't be said to be everywhere, there were still a lot of them. There were groups of wild birds, and the wild wyverns that Jiang Hai almost caught a while ago. Now there were a lot of them here. In addition to wyverns and wild turkeys, there were also a lot of pheasants, wild ducks, and so on. In addition to wild birds, there were also a lot of mammals and small mice running on the ground, but this kind of small mouse was not the kind in the house. This mouse was called a white-footed mouse. It was a very common mouse in North America, but it could only live in the fields and would not enter the human living environment. So in the countryside far away from the city, almost no one would deal with these white-footed mice. In addition to small animals such as mice and squirrels, there were also some coyotes, foxes, and other carnivores, but these animals were all small and posed no threat to Jiang Hai's cattle and his men. Of course, in addition to this, there were also a lot of wild rabbits and the like. There were also some traces of wild boars, snakes, and lizards. In short, although Jiang Hai didn't have any precious creatures here, the ecological structure and biological chain here were very complete. After walking into the forest for about 10 minutes, the grass in front of him slowly separated. The mountain lion that was a circle bigger than last year appeared in front of Jiang Hai. When it saw that it was Jiang Hai, it couldn't help but come over with a smile and rubbed its big head against Jiang Hai's leg. Jiang Hai also liked to rub the big cat's head. After playing with it for a while, Jiang Hai went to find the other 2 big guys with it. When he saw the big snake and the crocodile, to be honest, Jiang Hai regretted injecting aura into them because these 2 guys had grown quite big. They had obviously broken through the racial limit. If they were discovered by others, then Jiang Hai would be in trouble. But he was just thinking about it. Since he decided to take these 2 little guys in, he wouldn't regret it, even if they had grown up now. However, Jiang Hai already had an atavistic North American lion. He didn't care if he had another titanoboa and kingfisher, right? After getting close to these 3 animals and explaining to them that they had to protect the ginseng seeds in the periphery, Jiang Hai also left the grove and returned to the sun. He had to admit that compared to the coldness of the grove, Jiang Hai still preferred to stay under the sun. The warmth of the sun on his body was really comfortable. Looking at his manor in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. This was the place he wanted to protect. Chapter 1054. June was a very boring but comfortable time. At least that was what Jiang Hai thought. He had 12 months in a year. Other than going home for the new year, he had something to do almost every month. In January he planted seaweed. In February he put out bait, which was the little octopus and squid. At the same time, he had to start preparing for planting vegetables in February. In March, he put out the fish seedlings, planted fruits, planted grapes, and planted vegetables. In April, he had to pick the tea leaves, perform the Poseidon ceremony, and herd the cows. It was also the time for the annual beef show and wine competition. In May, he had to participate in the wine competition. In August, it was the best time to catch tuna. At the same time, in late August, the grapes were ripe and could be picked. In September, the grapes were ripe and it was time to make wine. At the same time, from the end of September to the beginning of October, it was also the time to buy the New Year's cattle. In the second half of October, it was the last time before winter. He had to make preparations. After that, there would be a series of festivals. In November, December, there would be winter festivals and then the New Year would be over. Every year, Jiang Hai's most boring time was probably June and July. Because at this time, most people couldn't go to the sea because the water temperature was still a little cold. The real time to go to the sea was from the end of July to the beginning of August and the beginning of September, which was less than 2 months. Jiang Hai went to the sea himself to have a look. There was nothing fun to do. The cows were like that and so were the fish. There was really nothing to do in the manor. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't feel bored because he was used to living in the manor. There were so many girls playing with him every day. He could eat whatever he wanted and buy whatever he wanted. If he was bored, he could go to the town for a walk. Under such circumstances, what was there to complain about? At least Jiang Hai felt pretty good. However, in this month when Jiang Hai was bored, there was a group of people who were very busy. This group of people was none other than Balian Mudun's people. Since the end of last month, after signing the agreement with Jiang Hai was very particular. There were no futures, no loans, and no concept of going public. He was definitely not a qualified businessman because he wouldn't borrow money to lay eggs. He was so honest and straightforward. He would do whatever he said. Since he had signed the contract with Balian Mudun, when he came back, he directly sent the first red wine requested by Balian Mudun this year. Of course, Balian Mudun also had to transfer the cash to his card. It couldn't be done without any money. This was also why, although Jiang Hai's things were good, they weren't particularly big. First, it was because Jiang Hai didn't want to make it big. Second, it was because of Jiang Hai's character. There would never be a situation where you would sell something first and talk about the price if it sold well. His things were like this. You got what you paid for. If you didn't buy it, he wouldn't sell it to you. It was said that harmony made wealth. It was really difficult for such a businessman to make a fortune. Of course, Jiang Hai was an exception. After the first batch of red wine was in place, Balian Mudun's operation began. Compared to Jiang Hai, he was an out-and-out operation master. He also had a lot of high-end sales. Almost as soon as Jiang Hai's first batch of red wine, 5,000 bottles, Balian Mudun had already decided where 3,000 of them would go. There was only one place, the Vatican. The Vatican. Speaking of this country within a country, probably everyone knew about it. Even if they hadn't been there, they had heard of it. This place was originally part of Italy. However, during the heyday of theocracy in the Middle Ages, it became a country. However, Italy had never recognized it. However, during World War II, in order to gain religious support, Mussolini recognized its legitimacy. Until now, this place was the legendary Papal States. It was the Holy Land of Catholicism, which 1/6 of the world's population believed in. The other Holy Land was Jerusalem, which was the Holy Land of Christianity and also the Holy Land of Judaism. Religious issues were not something that Jiang Hai needed to pay attention to. The people who lived in the Vatican were all from the Vatican. They were at least believers. All the world's religions had clear doctrines. Catholicism was the same. Originally, Catholics were not allowed to drink. Because there were many things about drinking in the Bible, Catholicism did not advocate getting drunk. Therefore, any drinks with alcohol content were actually forbidden. However, times were changing and people's translations were also changing. Since the Passover dinner, Jesus turned water into wine. Of course, this referred to the understanding and translation of modern people. Whether it really turned into wine or not, who knew? However, ever since this saying was approved, Catholics were allowed to drink red wine during celebrations. There were even some fanatical believers who would call red wine holy blood, although they didn't quite understand why they called it that. The Vatican was the Holy Land of Catholicism, where the Pope lived. Every year there would be a red wine purchasing event here. It could be said that as long as they selected a red wine, that red wine would become famous. To be selected, the only requirement was the quality. They required a large quantity, not just 1 or 2 bottles, but the quality was the same. All the wines had to be of the same quality. This was a problem for many wineries around the world. Balian Mudun had noticed this a long time ago, but he didn't have such a winery in his hands until he met Jiang Hai. This was also the reason why he always wanted to get this business. After the first batch of red wine was delivered, he directly sent it to the Vatican. The result made him quite excited. After half a month of selection, the Vatican signed a contract with him. Not only did he get a big order, but the words "Soaring Dragon Manor" also caused a huge response in the red wine industry. In fact, the Soaring Dragon Manor still had some influence in Europe, but its influence was more about beef and fish. They knew that the red wine of the Soaring Dragon Manor was good, but they really didn't know how good it was. Many people had tasted it, but the basic evaluation was that it was not bad. It was far from the honor it deserved. After all, most of the people here weren't professional sommeliers. Plus, the Soaring Dragon Manor belonged to the United States. They also had some regional problems. Therefore, it was difficult for Jiang Hai's red wine to open up sales and reputation in the European market. If the European market couldn't open up, let alone the United States. The people in the United States were basically from Europe. Their taste was actually more based on Europe, not the local taste. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai's red wine didn't become very popular after winning the gold medal last year. But it was different now. With the announcement from the Vatican, Jiang Hai's red wine could be said to have spread overnight to the ears of all the European executives, especially those who liked to drink red wine and those who liked to pursue these things, but didn't know much about it. They remembered that this red wine was available in the Walmart supermarket. So, a lot of people poured into the supermarket that night. But unfortunately, because of the contract signed by Jiang Hai, these red wines had been taken off the shelves. Not a single bottle could be found in the whole of Europe. Of course, some particularly rich people could fly to the United States to buy and drink, but after all, not all rich people had the time. In 3 days, the whole of Europe was looking for Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor red wine, but not a single bottle could be found because all the wine was in the hands of Balian Leon Mudun. At this time, Balian Leon Mudun was almost done talking with some famous European wineries, distributors, and top entertainment clubs. So, in mid-June he released the first batch of red wine, only 500 bottles. If 500 bottles of red wine were placed in a supermarket, no matter how big the supermarket was, it would be difficult to sell them all. However, in the whole of Europe it was too little. There were even some entertainment clubs that only had 1 or 2 bottles. The red wine drunk by the Pope didn't even need to be advertised. It was bought almost before the wine was put on the shelves, but the price had already increased a lot. Jiang Hai originally sold a bottle of red wine for $800, but Balian Leon Mudun bought it for $968. Naturally, he couldn't sell it at the original price, so he directly rounded it up. No, not $1,000. $1,000 would only make him a little money. He sold it for $1,200 a bottle. However, even if it was $1,200 a bottle, the wine was still in short supply. The first batch of people who bought it naturally had to show off in front of their friends. The hard strength of this wine was there. Except for the less well-known brands, even the pickiest wine tasters would find it difficult to say anything bad about it. In this way, the red wine of the Soaring Dragon Manor was almost an instant hit, just like the Apple IV in China. Westerners were naturally quite familiar with the concept of hunger marketing. There were only 2,000 bottles of red wine left, but it was difficult to meet the demand. After the second and third batches were released, there were only 500 bottles left in Balian Leon Mudun's hands. At this time he was ready to enter the second batch, but this time he was going to visit Jiang Hai personally. He wanted to see how much the upper limit was provided by Jiang Hai, and it would be best if he could take some photos. However, after knowing that he was going to visit Jiang Hai, an old friend of his came looking for him. Chapter 1055. Logan International Airport, also known as General Edward Lawrence Logan International Airport, was located on the outskirts of Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. It was an airport with a high attendance rate. There was no other way. Jiang Hai lived here. In the past, when there were no planes except for when he wanted to go home, he would go to other places from this airport. When he returned to China, he would go to New York. This airport was the 18th busiest airport in the United States, and it was also the largest airport in New England. The so-called New England was the northeast corner of the United States. It used to be the territory of the British, so it was also called New England. This airport had a total of 4 terminals and 6 runways, but now one of the runways had been rented by Jiang Hai. Of course, the airport could also use it, but it could only be used when Jiang Hai was not using it. If Jiang Hai's plane wanted to take off, the airport's plane could not take off. They could only wait. Jiang Hai had a large number of planes taking off every day. Don't forget, the Tenglong company also needed to use this airport. If this was in China, private planes could wait. But this was the United States. The rich were the masters. Jiang Hai was the master. He gave a lot of money to the airport every year. The airport would not make things difficult for Jiang Hai. If they annoyed Jiang Hai, it was not impossible for him to build an airport himself. At that time they would be in trouble. Today, Jiang Hai arrived outside Logan International Airport early in the morning. However, he wasn't here to take a flight. Instead, he was here to pick someone up. Balian Mudun had already called last night, and he was coming over today. As a business partner, Jiang Hai naturally did not mind him coming to visit his manor. It did not matter if he entertained them while he was at it. So this morning he drove 2 cars over. It could not be helped. Westerners were really particular about this. No matter how good your off-road vehicle or armored car was, you could not drive it when you were picking someone up. The other party would be picky, so you had to drive a car. Jiang Hai had a lot of cars in his house. Needless to say, the 2 F-750s were in Jiang Hai's manor. There was an F-650, a Battle Shield, a Rolls-Royce, a Ford E-350, and 3 Terrace that looked like black technology in Jiang Hai. However, some people still couldn't accept the fact that Terrace was picking people up. Because it was an electric car, some people would even be picky about it. So under Prawalton's suggestion, Jiang Hai bought 2 more cars a while ago, Audi S8. To be honest, Jiang Hai had complained about the price of cars in Wuxia and the United States more than once. But every time he bought a car he would still complain. The difference was too big. Jiang Hai had also asked Qili about this car. It was priced at 1.98 million yuan in China. Of course, it was the best model. With Jiang Hai's wealth, it was impossible for him to buy a standard model or a medium model. But this car was only sold for $96,200 in the United States. Even if you multiplied it by 7, it was only 670,000 yuan. There was still a gap of more than 1 million yuan. It was really too expensive. Naturally, Balian Mudun did not come alone. According to him, he came with 5 people. In addition to him, there was his bodyguard, a cameraman, a lawyer, and an old friend of his, Pierre Gagny, who Jiang Hai had promised to let come over to play. The 5 of them naturally could not sit in only one car. So Jiang Hai drove 2 cars, a Rolls-Royce and an Audi S8. The driver of the Rolls-Royce was Azalina, and the driver of the Audi S8 was Belle Lester. The co-driver of the car was Jiang Hai, and Knerson Peters was on the other side. After waiting for about 10 minutes in the parking lot, the sound of the plane landing could be heard. Then not long after, Balian Mudun and the other 4 walked out with their luggage. They saw Jiang Hai from afar. When they saw Jiang Hai, to be honest, they were stunned for a moment. Because such a situation was basically a formal occasion, it was inevitable to wear a suit. Even if it was hot, they had to wear a suit. But Jiang Hai wore it. It was very cool. He wore a very loose t-shirt, a pair of shorts with many pockets, and a pair of sneakers on his feet. Although they were all branded and not cheap, they really looked a little fake. But fortunately, the 2 of them knew Jiang Hai's character, so they did not say anything. They walked over with smiles on their faces and shook hands with Jiang Hai one by one. After shaking hands, Balian Mudun couldn't help but say helplessly, "Jiang, what you're wearing is really cool. Aha, you will get used to it in the future. I am used to being lazy, so if it is not a formal occasion, I will definitely not wear a suit." Hearing Balian Mudun's words, Jiang Hai also laughed. "I really admire your character. Where are we going now? Your manor? I can't wait." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pierre Garnier also laughed. For him, if Jiang Hai went to his restaurant dressed like this, he probably wouldn't be able to enter. But because he is Jiang Hai, he doesn't care about this. What he is interested in is still the ingredients. "No, I will take you to the place where you want to live first and then go to my place." After saying a few words to the 2, the group also got in the car. Those attendants naturally went to the Audi S8 in the back. The interior space of this car was quite large. It was not very crowded with 3 big men sitting in the back. As for the Rolls-Royce, naturally Balian Mudun and Pierre Garnier sat in it. In fact, to be honest, Jiang Hai should sit in the back, but he is used to not caring about trifles. The co-pilot seat is generally for the bodyguards because it is the most dangerous position, but Jiang Hai directly opened the door and sat in it. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care, the 2 guests here couldn't say anything and could only sit in it. As the car started the engine, they also rushed in the direction of Winthrop. When they came, Jiang Hai naturally had to provide a place to stay. Fortunately, he has a lot of places to stay. Of course, it is not in his home. What a joke, Jiang Hai is not going to let these guys live in his villa. There are so many girls in his villa, what will happen if there is an accident? Jiang Hai said that he has a lot of places to stay, mainly referring to his villas by the sea. When he built them, Jiang Hai mainly wanted to make money, but now it is a very good place to live. Living there will not be a drop in value at all. The car drove all the way, and when it passed by Jiang Hai's manor, Balian Mudun and Pierre Garnier both leaned on the window and looked over. Unfortunately, the car was moving too fast and they couldn't see anything clearly, but they had an intuitive idea that Jiang Hai's manor is really big. Especially when he saw the cattle in the distance, Pierre Garnier was extremely excited. You know, that is the best beef in the world. There is no need to describe it, it is the best. After passing by Jiang Hai's manor, the number of people gradually increased. Before they came, they heard that Winthrop is now a tourist city, but they didn't expect Winthrop's tourism to be so developed. After entering the town, almost everywhere was a group of tourists. About 80% of them were tourists from Wuxia, and the other 20% were tourists from Europe and the United States. As they walked and looked, the two couldn't help but feel a little emotional. This town is really beautiful. Blue sky, white clouds, clean and tidy streets, there is not a trace of pollution in the air, and large lawns and trees planted on the side of the road, the whole town exudes a refreshing feeling. After going to Argentina, Jiang Hai also felt that the colorful houses were very beautiful, so he also talked to Mayor Wallace, and many residents in the town will paint their houses in brighter colors, blue, yellow, pink, green. The colors of these houses will make them look more beautiful. The brighter colors will make people feel better involuntarily. Of course, it doesn't rule out that some people like those dim colors. Looking at this lively town, Balian Mudun and Pierre Gagnera had a good first impression of it. However, the two had different thoughts. Pierre Garnier thought that this place is really beautiful and the people look very happy. On the other hand, Balian Mudun thought that Jiang Hai's power is really not small. Before coming, he could not investigate Jiang Hai. He knew that Winthrop is Jiang Hai's territory. Jiang Hai is like a local emperor here, and to be able to rule so well, it can be seen that Jiang Hai's power is really strong. It seems that this person is really worth cooperating with. Driving, Jiang Hai quickly sent them to the place they will be staying for the next few days, a sky blue villa with clouds painted on it. This villa is not small. The entire villa covers an area of 500 square meters, and it has its own parking space. It was originally prepared for families who came to travel. The first floor has a kitchen, bathroom, living room, study, and so on. The second floor has bedrooms, a total of 6 bedrooms with their own bathrooms. On the other side of the house is the beach and the sea. To be honest, Jiang Hai doesn't have to worry about a house like this at all, because as long as people come to visit, this house is the first choice. The daily rent for a small house is $150, and the big one is $200. For a house like this, $200 a day. Water, electricity, gas and internet are all available. A dozen people can live in a squeeze. Why would you need a bicycle? Therefore, Jiang Hai's villa is almost always occupied. If you don't book it, you can't rent it, regardless of the off-season or the season. Chapter 1056. After taking these people to the villa, Jiang Hai went back. Because they were a little anxious, they came to visit in the afternoon. At noon, these people also walked around Winthrop and ate something casually. After filling their stomachs, Jiang Hai's car arrived to pick them up. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they also arrived at Jiang Hai's manor. When they arrived, they saw that Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters had been waiting here for a long time. After the car parked in the parking lot planned by Jiang Hai, they found that there were a lot of things in Jiang Hai's manor. At a glance, there were many animals, Xiaobai, Goldie, chirps flying overhead, big legs moving slowly in the distance, and so on. But when he saw Goldie and Xiaobai, Balian Mudun's bodyguard couldn't help but tense up. Because he saw the evil spirit from these two animals. God knows what these two dogs have experienced, but if he had to face them without a gun in his hand, he would be a little scared. Hello, my people are preparing dinner. After the visit, have a good meal here. Not to mention other things, wine, beef, and seafood will be enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't give them too much opportunity to observe his place. Seeing that everyone got out of the car, he walked over with a smile and said to the people in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, except for the bodyguard who was still on guard, the others smiled. These people knew how much Jiang Hai's red wine, Jiang Hai's beef, and Jiang Hai's fish were sold for. Tonight may be the most luxurious dinner in their lives. Pierre Gagny also smiled. He really wanted to see it. After everyone moved around for a while, Jiang Hai took them around the area. The first place to visit was naturally not the wine manor because it was the closest thing. While walking here, Jiang Hai also introduced his winery. My winery has been established for a long time. I invited Dulles Gerard, who is also a famous winemaker in France. He is now the person in charge. My grapes here, from planting to picking, are very strict. I only use very beautiful women. Looking at Balian Mudan and the others, Jiang Hai also opened his mouth and began to talk about the eggs. Naturally, who wouldn't say that their own things were good? Although it was a cooperative relationship, it didn't prevent Jiang Hai from talking about it first. But to be honest, Jiang Hai wasn't wrong, right? This winery was indeed established many years ago, during the time of the previous owner of the manor, but it had never been used. Jiang Hai also didn't say when his grapes were planted. Picking grapes and planting grapes were indeed beautiful women. Under the nourishment of Jiang Hai's aura and his own body, if they were to be graded on a scale of 100, they would be at least 80 out of 100. If they were to become an internet celebrity in China, they would be able to earn hundreds of thousands of yuan a month. They were beautiful, beautiful and smooth. In everyone's eyes, they were at the level of top beauties. But who knew that these beauties surrounded Jiang Hai all day long, unconditionally obeying Jiang Hai's orders? While listening to Jiang Hai's nonsense, these people also walked into the winery. As soon as they walked in, Balian Mudan couldn't help but smack his mouth. He originally thought that Jiang Hai was talking nonsense, but now it seemed that what he said was true. Grapes were perennial. The grapes from old vines would be big, round, and beautiful. However, although Jiang Hai's vines were only planted for 2 or 3 years, he had aura. So now his grapes were quite good and the output was quite high. In Balian Mudan's eyes, these were naturally old vines. Although he had some doubts as to why the wine here was so good and only began to appear in recent years, what Jiang Hai said was indeed true. And when he saw Aphrodite and the others working under the vines, he was even more shocked. Just now, when he heard Jiang Hai's nonsense, he didn't believe in the old vines, so naturally, he didn't believe in the beauties planting grapes. He thought that Jiang Hai was just looking for an excuse, but now that he saw Aphrodite and the others skillfully handling the grapes, he couldn't help but believe it. Oh my God, they are really beauties and there are so many of them. The cameraman behind him couldn't help but whisper after seeing Aphrodite and the others. Then the camera in his hand didn't stop. In his eyes, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Sheila, Ashiria, Bridget, and Janice were like goddesses who walked down from a fairy tale, skillfully working in this green grape bush. Perhaps they felt the presence of the flash. These girls couldn't help but look over, then smiled sweetly at Jiang Hai and continued to work. For them, in addition to taking care of Jiang Hai, taking care of the grapes was their job. Looking at these girls, Balian Mudan's men were a little overwhelmed. You are really willing to spend money. With such beauty you can be a model outside. Planting grapes here, you are really extravagant. Looking at Aphrodite and the others in the distance, Balian Mudan couldn't help but pull Jiang Hai's sleeve and whisper, "Hey brother, relax, these are all my women." Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai said with a smile, What do you mean?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Balian Mudan said with a look of surprise, "It means literally they are all my women." Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "It's really incredible, brother, I'm already a little envious of you." Looking at the figures and faces of Aphrodite and the others, Balian Mudan couldn't help but sigh speechlessly. The world was unfair, not to mention now full of malice. After taking a look at the grape winery, Jiang Hai and the others went to other places. Of course, there was no need to take photos in other places, but the things that stimulated these people were still happening. Of course, this time it was not the beauties that stimulated them. There were no beauties in Jiang Hai's ranch and fishery, it was the money that stimulated them. Wuxia people pay attention to not showing their wealth. It is difficult to know how much money a person has. Of course, the exception is those who like to show off. Americans pay attention to showing their wealth, because this is also a standard to show your strength. Jiang Hai is now showing his financial resources. The richer you are, the more assured your partners will be. This is what Prawalton taught him. Next they went to see Jiang Hai's ranch. When the people here knew that there were nearly 50,000 cows in Jiang Hai's manor, each of which could be sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, they were quite uneasy. If it weren't for Knerson Peters here, they might have thought of a way to kidnap Jiang Hai. What a joke, 50,000 cows, even if each one is sold for $100,000, that's still 5 billion. What's more, Jianghai is selling more than 100,000, it's likely to be more than 150,000, that's more than $7 billion and that's USD. Thinking of this wealth, the smile on Balian Mudun's face became more and more relieved. This wealth alone is enough for him. Pierre Garnier's eyes were shining as he looked at the cows. A good chef is naturally very careful about the selection of ingredients. In his eyes, Jianghai's cows are all of the golden ratio. He has never seen such a large group of cows. Such good cows are really shocking. Jianghai took the shocked people to the dock. He took them to the fishing boat and took them to the sea for a spin. At the same time he introduced the fish in the sea. They may not have any concept of these fish, but Pierre Garnier was still very shocked. This was because he had to grab these fish every week. Now that they had come to the place where they came from, it was really amazing. Unknowingly the sky gradually darkened. Jianghai also took them back to his villa. In the villa, Chia had already prepared dinner for tonight. When these people saw Aphrodite and the other beautiful girls serving the dishes, everyone present was envious of Jianghai. If you want money, you have money, you have power, you have power. If you want women, you have dozens of women who can be regarded as goddesses in their dreams. What's the meaning of life? Every day you just have to make money at home. It's simply a dream of a life in heaven. But unfortunately they were only thinking about it. After the dishes were served, Jianghai's women all left. Jianghai's women also have leaders, namely Qi Jie, Chia, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunqian. These 4 people are all from Wuxia. When the men are talking about things, the women naturally have to avoid them. It was also because they avoided them that these people could withdraw their gaze and put it on the dishes in front of them. In the end, when they saw the dishes, these people all sucked in a breath of cold air. The beef that they saw today after being cooked was placed there piece by piece. The plates were stacked like a small mountain. There were lobsters that weighed dozens of pounds, deep-sea anchovies that were about a meter long, and all kinds of food. Looking at them, these people's mouths were watering. On the other hand, Pierre Garnier frowned. Although he could see that these ingredients were quite good, he didn't dare to disagree with this method. However, in accordance with the principle of guests following the host's preferences, he still didn't say anything and cut a piece of steak to eat. When the steak entered his mouth, his eyebrows raised. This taste is too good. Chapter 1057. For example, if you use applewood as fuel, you will add the aroma of applewood into the steak, and it's best to maintain the temperature at. If you use weather, maintain the temperature at. If you use carbon, maintain the temperature at. Don't use an oven because heating in all directions will quickly make the moisture in the steak disappear. Steak that is more than 80% done will not have any other texture except for dryness. Next, I will teach you how to make the sauce. Looking at Chia, who was standing beside him, wearing a white dress and constantly recording in a notebook, Pierre Garnier said while demonstrating on the iron plate in front of him. Brother, I envy you so much. I have never dreamed of a life like yours. It's great, your place is simply heaven, a man's heaven. On the other side, on the balcony of the yacht, Balian Mudun was sunbathing while drinking red wine from Jianghai's manor, then looked at Jianghai beside him and said with envy, "Ah, there's no point in being envious." Hearing his words, Jianghai shook his head and said with a smile, "He is telling the truth. There's no point in being envious after all, he is the only one in the world who has the Dragon Ball. Top-grade red wine, top-grade food, top-grade wealth, and more than one top-grade beauty. When these things surround a man, to be honest, there are very few people who would not be envious of you." With a sigh, Balian Mudun continued. This is the 2nd day since they came to Winthrop. Last night, after Jianghai invited them to dinner, they went back to sleep. This morning they came again. It just so happened that Jianghai had just woken up. In order to show his skills, Pierre Garnier showed his skills to Jianghai. If he used ordinary ingredients, then he might not be as good as Chia. But now he is also using ingredients from Jianghai's place. After the food was made, Jianghai almost swallowed his tongue. It was too delicious. Chia naturally tasted it and was very surprised, so she whispered to Jianghai that she wanted to learn. Looking at her, Jianghai suggested that today's weather was good, so they could go out to sea to play. At the same time, he could ask Prawalton to add an extra portion of meat and seafood that it sent to Paris every time. This was specially prepared for Pierre Garnier. Of course, there was also a request. He wanted Pierre Garnier to teach Chia. Foreign chefs were not like Wuxia chefs, who were particular about family ties and treasured their own skills. As long as foreign chefs taught students, they would more or less teach more. Especially when he received benefits, he agreed directly. Balian Mudun left his 3 members of the inspection team and continued to look at the winery. Jiang Hai also asked Bell to accompany them, while Jiang Hai took Edouard Anderson, Chia, and Knerson Peters to board the boat with them. Edouard Anderson drove Jiang Hai's yacht and sped towards the depths of Jiang Hai's ocean. After boarding the boat, Chia had been studying how to cook with Pierre Garnier. After a while, Chia came out with a plate of steak and walked to Jiang Hai's side with a smile. "Come, have a taste." She cut the steak into small pieces, pierced a piece with a toothpick, and sent it to Jiang Hai's mouth to wait for his evaluation. After eating the steak, Jiang Hai felt it carefully and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and nod. "It's indeed better than before. The beef inside is cooked, but the water is stored inside. It's not dry at all and it's very chewy. It tastes good." Although Jiang Hai's cooking skills were average, his evaluation of food was good. After all, he had eaten so many delicious food, and it was not a problem for him to say that he was a foodie. The biggest difference between a foodie and a good-for-nothing was that one knew how to eat while the other could eat. A good-for-nothing only knew whether it was delicious or not, but he didn't know why it was delicious or not. Even if it was not delicious, he could still eat it. But a foodie generally found it difficult to eat something that was not delicious, and he would tell you why it was delicious. Right now, Jiang Hai was a professional foodie. Other than eating worms, he could tell what was good and what wasn't. The steak that Chia made now, to be honest, tasted better than the one she made in the past. Chia was very talented in cooking, but because of her illness in the past, she learned how to cook from television, the internet, and books. She didn't have a professional teacher to teach her, so she was still a little lacking. Miss Chi is the most talented young person I have ever seen. If I met such a young person in France, I would definitely invite her to practice in my restaurant for a period of time. But Miss Chi doesn't need it now. It's the best practice to be with Mr. Jiang. At this time, Pierre Garnier also came over with a smile and complimented Chia. He was currently in a good mood. Not only did he get to see the beautiful scenery, but the harvest this time was also very good. With Jiang Hai's special permission, he didn't have to queue up for their ingredients. This was a good thing for him. For this reason, he specially called the restaurant. In the future, as long as Jiang Hai called, he didn't have to wait in line at all, and he could make an appointment immediately. This was the good karma that Jiang Hai got. As for giving advice to Chia, it was just a casual advice. "Haha, then I took away your good student." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed, and then everyone on the boat laughed. Then they faced the rising sun and kept talking and laughing. Soon the sun rose very high. After a while, the speed of the speedboat gradually slowed down and began to cruise automatically. At this time, Edouard Anderson also came out of the cockpit. "Boss, let's rest in the living room. It's almost noon and the sun is too hot outside. We also need to prepare the ingredients for lunch." Hearing Edouard Anderson's words, Jiang Hai also took a look. Indeed, the noon sun was a bit too dazzling, so everyone returned to the cabin. Knerson Peters was responsible for the wine bottles and beer cans on the deck. After entering the cabin, Pierre began to study the existing ingredients. "Master, let me do it, you can guide me." Looking at Pierre's appearance, Chia also walked over and said to him with a smile. After Pierre nodded with a smile, he raised his head and looked at Jiang Hai in confusion. "Jiang, why don't you prepare any seafood here?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Pierre asked in confusion. "Seafood? Aha, what kind of seafood do you want? I can get it for you in a minute." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. "Mr. Gainier, you are now at sea. My boss's fishing ground is not the best fishing ground in the world, but it will definitely not fall out of the top 3. There are countless precious sea ingredients here. What do you need? Just tell me. Everything in the sea is available here." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edouard Anderson also said with a smile. "Wow, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Haha, when you talk about the sea, you naturally want to eat seafood, and the seafood in northwest France is the best." Hearing the words of Jiang Hai and Edouard Anderson, Pierre Gainier also laughed. He forgot that the seafood that can make Michelin restaurants in Paris every week comes from under his feet. Northwest. But hearing his words, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled and looked at him and asked. Although France is not as big as the United States or Wuxia, the people in each place are different and their eating habits are different. We divide France into 4 parts. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled gaze, Pierre Gainier also laughed. Many people knew about French cuisine and many people had eaten it. However, those who really understood French cuisine knew that French cuisine was also divided into different categories. Just like the 8 major cuisines in China, French cuisine was also divided according to the situation of different places. The southwest region is close to the inland, so it mainly eats meat and poultry. Honey-glazed duck, braised pork with soybeans, and the most representative of France, foie gras, are the representative delicacies here. The southeast region is rich in water resources such as near the Alps. There is also the existence of the sea, so they mainly eat river fish. The typical dishes are lobster sauce with white spotted pike, Marseille fish soup, Provence stew mixed vegetables, Jianghai's favorite cheese hot pot, crying roast lamb leg. The northeast region is the region of Burgundy and Alsace. It is rich in red wine, so everything is red wine. Red wine stewed chicken, red wine stewed beef, sausages with sauerkraut and egg pancakes are also the best there. And when it comes to the most representative French cuisine, it naturally has white snails there. Remember, if you want to eat authentic French foie gras, you have to go to the southwest of France. If you want to eat authentic white snails, you have to go to the northeast of France. And when it comes to the most representative French settlements, it is Paris and the northwest region. Most of the places here are near the sea, so it is also the place where French seafood dishes are concentrated. Saint Jacques scallops, mussels stewed in white wine, all kinds of oysters. This is a paradise for people who like to eat shellfish in the world. Of course, in addition to shellfish, steak tartare and crepes are also quite popular. Chapter 1058. Hearing Pierre's words, Edouard Anderson drove the boat and stopped on a reef. What? How to distinguish the reef? Just look at the sonar. There was sonar under the boat which could depict the situation below. It was easy to find some reefs and coral reefs. After finding the place, Edouard Anderson and Knerson Peters went into the sea together. Although the water temperature was still a little cold in early July, it was still within their acceptable range. After all, they were both men and they were not that delicate. Moreover, they were not allowed to soak in the water for too long. Holding a dagger, the two dived in with snorkeling equipment. 10 minutes later, Knerson Peters and Edouard Anderson came up, each carrying a bag of shellfish. There were all kinds of shellfish such as scallops, oysters, abalones, and all of them were wild. Jiang Hai did not cultivate these things, so these things were all wild. But to be honest, the shellfish he cultivated were almost the same as those in the wild. When the shellfish were brought up, Pierre Gagny couldn't wait to process them. As he processed them, he sighed with emotion. Jiang Hai's place was really a treasure. Even if the French ate these things compared with Jiang Hai's, it was still a lot worse. He could do nothing but sigh with emotion. Although Pierre Gagny was not young anymore, every chef was a head chef from the moment they were born. They all worked their way up step by step, from handyman to butcher, then to stir-fry, plate decorator, and finally to become a head chef. In Wuxia, being a special grade chef wasn't as easy as it seemed. You had to go through a series of examinations. After 3 years in the current position, you could take the examination for the next position. Therefore, even the youngest special grade chef had to be in his 30s. Western food, especially French food, was more particular about this, so naturally Pierre's cooking was quite good. After watching for a while, Chia also began to cook. She came here to be an apprentice, not to play. Chi, you're really talented. After dealing with the shellfish, Pierre taught Chia how to do these things. He had to admit that Chia might be smart, or it might be because of the Reiki. It was not wrong to say that Chia could draw inferences about other things from one example. Pierre only taught her once, but she had already done a good job. Seeing this, Pierre couldn't help but sigh. He had to admit that Chia was really talented. You're the best teacher, Chia said politely when she heard Pierre Garnier's words. A delicious lunch was eaten on the sea. After lunch, everyone went back to their rooms to rest. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun was not so hot, so they came out, but they didn't sunbathe now. Balion Mudun and Pierre Garnier saw that Jiang Hai had a fishing rod here, so they were ready to try it. Jiang Hai just smiled. The fish in his fishing ground were quite tricky. Generally, they couldn't be caught without bait with Reiki. Even a veteran like Edouard Anderson had some difficulties fishing, let alone them. So Jiang Hai just sat next to them and studied French food with Chia. He let these two guys suffer. Sure enough, after fishing for an hour, the two of them didn't want to fish anymore. It wasn't that there were no fish. They could see that there were fish, and even some fish jumped out of the water from time to time in the distance as if they were mocking them. The bait they put on was often eaten up by some fish, but they just didn't take the bait. They were quite speechless about this. At the critical moment, they still have to rely on Jiang Hai. When the two of them had given up, Jiang Hai took the fishing rod from one of them, then put on a piece of beef he brought on the boat, and threw the bait into the distant sea. Jiang, it's not that I want to discourage you, but the fish here can only be caught with a net. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Balian Mudun couldn't help but lean over and say to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai just smiled. He doesn't know shit. Balian, I think brother Jiang should be able to catch it. After all, this is his territory. If these fish don't give him face, aren't you afraid that he will fish up the entire sea? At this time, Pierre Garnier also came over with a smile and said to Balian Mudun. Of course, what he said was also a sarcastic remark. After hearing his words, Balian Mudun also laughed, but just when the two of them were laughing happily, Jiang Hai's fishing rod suddenly began to spin quickly. Seeing this situation, the two of them were stunned and instantly stopped talking. Jiang Hai directly picked up the fishing rod and tried it. It's a small fish, so there's no need to take it out. Jiang Hai directly spun the fishing wheel and began to reel in the line. Not long after, a red figure appeared in front of everyone. Oh, it's a real snapper. Seeing this figure, Pierre Garnier, an expert, had already recognized what it was and couldn't help but exclaim with some emotion. When Jiang Hai pulled the fish onto the boat, everyone saw that it was indeed a real snapper. True bream is also a type of bream. It belongs to the order Perciformes bream family. It is one of the more expensive bream. Jiang Hai does not breed this thing because it is not easy to raise, because it is not a gregarious fish. However, their number is not small. This fish won't grow very big. This fish is about 30 centimeters long and weighs more than 2 caddies. After being taken down, Pierre Garnier was very happy because this fish can be considered as dinner. At that time he can show off his skills, and Chia was also very happy because she can learn more. However, this 2 caddies fish can't fill the boat, so Jiang Hai deliberately put a bigger bait the next time he baited it. This time he is going to catch a bigger fish. However, when throwing the bait he threw it closer. Jiang Hai's bait is submerged, that is, the kind with lead. If the bait is thrown far away it can wait, but if it is thrown close, it has to be pulled up immediately. However, with this pull Jiang Hai felt that his hand sank. He knew that there is another fish and this fish is not small. But no matter how big it is, Jiang Hai's monstrous strength is there. As long as it is a fish he can pull it up unless it is hanging on the reef. As Jiang Hai gradually increased his strength, the fish under the water was slowly pulled up. Feeling it struggle, Jiang Hai knew that it is indeed a fish and a big one. At this time, when Edward Anderson saw Jiang Hai's bent fishing rod, he was stunned for a moment, and then immediately prepared. He knew that a fish that can make Jiang Hai's fishing rod bent must not be a good fish. When he was ready, the people who were originally surrounding the real snapper also noticed that something was wrong and gathered around. At this time, the guy who had been fighting with Jiang Hai for almost 10 minutes under the water slowed down a little. At this time, Jiang Hai also exerted his strength with his arms and directly lifted up. In an instant, a huge flat fish was pulled onto the boat by him. After getting on the boat, this huge fish was still constantly flapping its wings, but unfortunately this is not its territory. What a big flounder. Looking at this fish, Edward Anderson couldn't help but smile. This fish seems to be more than 100 kilograms. No wonder it can last so long in Jiang Hai's hands. If they bring it back, every family will be able to eat it. As for Pierre Garnier, his eyes were shining. Flounders are flatfishes. In China, some people say that these two fish are different, but in fact they are the same. Flatfishes are also called butterfly fishes, and flounders are its other name. Of course, different species have different names such as three-eyed flatfishes, desert flounders, and so on. This kind of fish is a fish that lives on the bottom of the sea, and this kind of fish has a special characteristic. That is, if you don't care about it, it will grow very big at the bottom of the sea. Some people have even caught a fish of more than 200 kilograms. Of course, there may be bigger ones, but who knows? This kind of fish is basically very difficult to catch with a fishing net, unless it's a bottom fishing net. However, Jiang Hai has a lot of coral reefs and reefs, so it's impossible to use this kind of fishing net. Therefore, in Jiang Hai's manner, the number of these fish is definitely not small. Saltwater fish and river fish are different. Some people like to eat small fish because the meat is more tender. However, for saltwater fish, except for a few small species such as herring, most people still like to eat big fish. Especially Westerners, they don't know how to pick out fish bones, so they only eat big fish or fish steaks. Looking at the big fish in front of him, Pierre Garnier felt that he has a place to be useful again. After catching the fish, Edward Anderson controlled the boat and began to return. Today, whether it's Balian Mudun, Pierre Garnier, or Jiang Hai and Chia, they all felt very good. They all had a harvest. In the evening, Pierre Garnier taught Chia how to cook today's dinner. Naturally, it was also very popular. After dinner, the two also left with their subordinates. Jiang Hai and the others tidied up and prepared to go to bed. However, before going to bed, a bath was necessary. After Delina, Marian, and Taraga all took a bath, Jiang Hai also entered the female bathroom. Recently, the number of times he took a bath in the male bathroom seemed to be decreasing. Chapter 1059. Who? A deep breath, accompanied by the sound of water splashing, Wallace Shelley stood up from the hot spring pool with her face full of water. Then she smiled and swam towards Jiang Hai. As for Jiang Hai, he leaned against the edge of the pool very indifferently. Aphrodite sat behind him, letting his head lean against her chest. Dana was pressing on Jiang Hai's left shoulder, Hilda was pressing on Jiang Hai's right shoulder, Paige was pressing on Jiang Hai's left hand, Sheila was pressing on Jiang Hai's right hand, Azalina and Galina Vasilea were holding Jiang Hai's waist, and at the same time licking Jiang Hai's waistline with their tongues. Ohelia was holding her left foot, Bridget was holding her right foot, and constantly using her tongue to play with Jiang Hai's toes. Jenny was lowering her head and sucking something that couldn't be described. Chi Jia was sitting in the distance with Feng Yunshan applying bath gel to each other. Ai Xiaoxi was sitting next to Chia, watching her record the dishes she learned today and some key points to pay attention to. She wasn't afraid that her notebook would be wet by the mist here. After Wallace Shelley swam over, she came to the other side of Jiang Hai's thing that couldn't be described. She took the initiative to take over Jenny's work, and Jenny moved down a little and began to attack the eggs. The cooperation between them was quite skillful. Will those guys still come tomorrow? At this time, Chi Jie, who was sitting in the distance, had already applied bath gel. She was washing in the distance while asking Jiang Hai. It can be seen that she was used to such a scene in front of her. Almost every night, such a scene would be staged here, but the location may be a little different, so Jiang Hai's nights have never been unfulfilling. If it was an ordinary man, he might have already informed his family to collect the corpse. He shouldn't come. Hearing Chi Jie's words, Jiang Hai also opened his eyes and said to her with a smile. It's best if they don't come. Those foreigners look at us lustfully every day. If it weren't for the fact that they are also guests, I would have already broken their eyes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Jie said unhappily. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly. However, he couldn't refute her words. Indeed, those people's gazes were very wretched. There was nothing he could do about it. He was from France. What kind of place was France? Holy land of broken shoes. In that country, if a man and a woman met on the street, they could go straight to the hotel to play games without asking for each other's names. What else could you expect from them? Jiang Hai had already been to various countries in Europe. If one were to talk about the most open country, it would be the Netherlands. This was because the Netherlands was created by landfill. The entire country was very afraid. If one day the country was finished, what would they do if they died? Therefore, the whole country of the Netherlands was hedonistic, but no one knew why France was so open. But if you want to say that France was open, it didn't have sex capitals like Amsterdam and Manchester. But generally speaking, in France, as long as the husband and wife weren't together, there was a 70% chance that they would go out to fool around. Moreover, the laws of France especially protected women. For example, if two people got married and the man went out to fool around and was found by the woman, it was the man's responsibility and he would lose 70% of the family property. If the woman went out to fool around, it was also the man's responsibility and he would lose 50% of the family property. Therefore, in France, to be honest, young people rarely got married. They all went out to fool around. There were very few people who got married before 30. These girls around Jiang Hai had traveled all over the world. They were the highest level of existence. These guys could control themselves, but they couldn't control their eyes. Jiang Hai couldn't do anything about this. Balian Mudun had already said it very seriously, but if they peeked, Jiang Hai couldn't possibly dig out their eyeballs, right? Fortunately, these guys wouldn't come tomorrow. Otherwise, Jiang Hai might really dig their eyes out one day. Okay, soak for a while more and he will be dehydrated. Tonight, it's Feng Yunshan and Xiaoxi, right? The accompanying people are Hilda and Paige. Hurry up and take him back. After confirming that those people wouldn't come tomorrow, Chi Jia was also very happy. She glanced at the calendar hanging in the bathroom and said to everyone. After hearing her words, the other girls reluctantly let go of Jiang Hai's body. After drying Jiang Hai, the group also returned to the villa. After returning to the villa, Jiang Hai and the other four returned to Jiang Hai's room. There was no need to say what to do. It was a quiet night. If there was anything, it was not allowed to be written. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai got up because today was the day Balian Mudun and the others were going to leave. After all, they still had so many things to do in Europe. It was impossible to stay in Winthrop for too long. This time, Balian Mudun's purpose was to see Jiang Hai's wine manor. After confirming the production capacity, the rest didn't matter. Pierre Garnier originally came to take a look, but he didn't expect to solve the problem of his restaurant's raw materials. He was quite satisfied. He had achieved his goal this time by 1,000%. Now that they had gotten what they wanted, they didn't need to stay here for too long. So it was almost time to go back today. When they came, it was Jiang Hai who picked them up. When they went back, it was natural for Jiang Hai to send them back. A line of 2 cars sent the 5 of them to the Boston airport. After that, they got on the plane and returned. Jiang Hai also drove back to the manor. Originally, according to his idea, he would continue to stay at home after returning. There was no better life than this, at least he thought so. But unfortunately, God didn't seem to want him to continue to stay at home. Just as he was about to return to the manor, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that the caller was none other than Prawalton. Jiang Hai contacts 2 people almost every day. One is Chi Li and the other is Prawalton. Even Selena Gomez only contacts him 2 or 3 times a week at most. He just called her yesterday. Why did she call so early today? Although he was a little confused, Jiang Hai still picked up the phone. Hey Prawalton, you're so early today. After picking up the phone, Jiang Hai said with a smile, and Azalina, who was acting as a driver beside him, chuckled after hearing his words, then turned her head and continued to drive. I dreamed of you last night, but when I got up in the morning I found that you were not there, so I called to ask where you went. When it comes to flirting, Prawalton should be the most powerful woman around Jiang Hai. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton naturally followed up with the previous sentence, which made Jiang Hai ashamed. Ahem, where else can I be at home? Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai coughed softly, then said with some embarrassment. Hee, I won't tease you anymore. I called you so early because I have something to tell you. Our family will have a family annual meeting the day after tomorrow. Our big supplier, are you interested in being my male companion? Hearing Jiang Hai's slightly embarrassed words, Prawalton said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai thought about it carefully. Isn't your annual meeting at Wuxia? After hearing her words, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Wuxia means the end of the year in Minnan dialect. In the Minnan area, the 2nd and the 16th of every month are the days when Minnan people worship the local god. It is called Ya. The 16th of December is the last Ya, so it is called Wuxia. Now it also means the end of the year. Later it spread to Wuxia. Generally, the annual meeting held by the company at the end of the year is called Wuxia. Of course, Jiang Hai just said it casually. Our annual meeting is not fixed. We can hold it whenever we want. However, after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai had nothing else to say. This big group is really casual. You know, this is the world's largest retail giant. How can the annual meeting be so casual? Well, the day after tomorrow? Let's do it in New York. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. Regardless of his identity as a supplier, or his relationship with Pra Walton, the other party held an annual meeting. He had to go and express his sincerity. Yes, I will go to New York tomorrow. You can get up and come over then. I will tell you the address. Hearing that Jiang Hai agreed, Prawalton also talked to Jiang Hai with a smile. Although the annual meeting is the day after tomorrow, it is impossible to go on the day of the annual meeting, right? Especially Prawalton, who is the host, naturally has to go in advance, and Jiang Hai also has to go in advance. Well, okay. Attending an annual meeting is only 2 or 3 days. It doesn't matter, just treat it as having fun. Have a good rest tonight. I'm not the only one who will go tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai agree, Prawalton also lowered her voice and whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think. Without thinking, he knew that Prawalton must have prepared a lot of programs for him, but looking at Azalina, who was smiling beside him, it seems that it will be difficult for him to recharge his energy tonight. This little girl used to be cold, but now it seems that she is getting closer and closer to the people in the family. It seems that she is very likely to tell them what Prawalton said just now. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's physical strength is here. If they wanted to fight, then they would fight. In terms of fighting, Jiang Hai had shamelessly said that everyone in his family was trash. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.